Chapter 66. 300 feet away, standing on top of a wall, was a handsome young man wearing a silver robe and a white cloak. Beside him stood a dozen or so men in black, all of them looking at him as if they had seen a ghost. Never in their wildest dreams would they have thought that the collapse of the huge stone wall would not crush Wu Qi and his companions. Wu Qi's movements were so fast that when he pushed away the huge stone wall and came out from under it, these people were all stunned for a moment. During this time, 9 crossbow bolts whistled through the air. The silver-robed young man let out a strange cry. His body tilted, and he tumbled down from the top of the wall. Even though he had escaped quickly, one of the bolts still pierced through his shoulder, creating a hole in his body. The silver-robed young man howled in pain. When he fell to the ground, he lost his balance, and his right leg slanted to the ground. A crisp sound of bones breaking could be heard. His ankle was also broken. 5 of the other dozen or so men in black were injured by the crossbow bolts. The 9 cloud-piercing crossbow was extremely powerful. Within a short distance of 300 feet, those who were hit would be pierced through, leaving behind a hole the size of a child's fist. Blood spurted out. Although those who were hit were not in vital areas, they were still in so much pain that they felt powerless. The silver-robed young man's screams were still echoing in the night sky. In just 2 leaps, Wu Qi had arrived in front of him, and without hesitation, the prickle in his right hand pierced towards his throat. Wu Qi's eyes were as cold as ice, revealing a killing intent that made people despair. He shouted in a low voice, "If I don't die, you will die." The silver-robed young man raised his head in horror. He was about to scream, but just happened to see Wu Qi's cold, emotionless eyes that did not seem human. His breath stagnated, and the scream that had reached his throat stopped abruptly. Instinctively, he pushed his hands against the ground, rolling and crawling backwards. But behind him was a wall, and after running for 2 steps, he bumped into the wall. The pitch-black prickle carried a faint, fishy smell, and was about to pierce into the silver-robed young man's body at lightning speed. From the corner of the street, a gentle voice of a woman suddenly rang out. "Stop!" Wu Qi didn't care about the woman's screams. He stared at the silver-robed youth, and the prickle pierced deeply into his throat. The silver-robed young man stared at Wu Qi in disbelief. His body twitched, and in the blink of an eye, dark blood spurted out from his 7 apertures and pores. His body quickly shrunk into a piece of black meat the size of a child. The man in black on top of the wall let out a heart-wrenching cry of despair, "Young master!" A few black-clothed men leaped down from the top of the wall. The weapons in their hands carried a foot-long aura of energy as they hacked down viciously at Wu Qi's head. With a disdainful snort, Wu Qi lightly tapped the ground with his toes and quickly rushed toward the direction of the woman's voice. Like a mad tiger, Luo Kadi roared and charged towards Ji Hao. He swung his sword, and a 6-feet-long, pale red sword beam flashed across the air. A few black-clothed men were still in midair when the sword beam slashed across their waists. Blood spurted out, and a dozen or so bloody bodies fell heavily to the ground. These black-clothed men were not dead yet, and the upper half of their bodies twitched on the ground, constantly letting out extremely mournful cries. Luo Kadi swung his sword, venting all the anger and resentment of being captured and forced by Wu Qi to join Lu Qingfeng's side. He raised his bloody sword and said with a smile, "Useless chickens and stray dogs, unable to withstand even a single blow. How dare you, a bunch of lowly dogs, have any intention of touching our young master?" The night wind whistled in his ears. Wu Qi stared at the corner of the street a few hundred feet away. A luxurious carriage with gold as the shaft, pure silver as the wheels, and dark green gauze was stopped at the corner of the street. A dozen strong men wearing green cloaks were standing guard around the carriage. They stared coldly at Wu Qi, who was rushing towards them. The woman's voice just now came from this carriage. No matter who the woman in the carriage was, she must be in cahoots with that silver-robed youth. Ambushing in the middle of the night, knowing the silver-robed youth who was obviously the mastermind, and watching from the corner of the street, it was obvious that this woman was not Wu Qi's friend. Right after he arrived at Ji City, he was lured out by someone and forced to engage in a fierce battle. They even had to use the city's defensive mechanisms and heavy ballistae. This made Wu Qi's heart burn with anger. No matter who the enemy was, he just had to kill them. As long as Lu Chengfeng inherited Yan Buji's title and official position, who in Great Yan Dynasty would be someone he couldn't afford to offend. The blue gleam in Wu Qi's eyes condensed, and a deep yet unceasing voice came out from his mouth like the roar of a great tide in the middle of the night. He lowered his body, hid 2 prickles behind his back, and strode towards the carriage. 4 green cloaks were thrown into the sky. 4 green-clothed men pulled out their swords and strode towards Wu Qi. One of them roared, "How dare you! Step back or else we'll kill you!" Before his words could fade away, Wu Qi exerted his strength with his feet, crushing a few of the stones on the street. Borrowing the force, he sprinted forward, and in just a blink of an eye he had arrived next to the 4 men. He thrust both of his palms forward, and the prickles pierced through the air and arrived in front of the 4 young men. The swords were as white as snow, and the wind created by the swords was fierce and loud. 4 sword beams transformed into 4 bright ribbons and thrust forward, accurately hitting the prickles. Wu Qi let out a strange laugh, and infused his innate water energy into the prickles. When the swords touched the prickles, they were pushed aside by the whirlpool of airflow. The prickles gently thrust out and pierced into the bodies of the 4 young men. Although the prickles had only pierced 3 inches into their bodies, the 4 young men began to convulse violently. Their bodies quickly twisted and shrunk, and in just a blink of an eye, they had turned into pitch-black meatballs. Dirty blood flowed and stained the ground. "How dare you!" The young men near the carriage were shocked and angered at the same time. 6 green cloaks were thrown out, and 6 young men pulled out their single-edged broadswords, rushing towards Wu Qi with small steps. The bright moon hung high in the sky, and the 6 broadswords brought up streams of light, like shooting stars shooting down from the sky, hacking towards Wu Qi's body. Wu Qi, who was rushing forward, stopped abruptly. He laughed out loud and tucked the prickles under his armpits, and suddenly, 2 9-cloud-piercing crossbows appeared in his hands. Along with a series of cracking sounds, 18 pure steel bolts shot out. The young men in green who were rushing towards Wu Qi were less than 30 feet away from Wu Qi. They couldn't dodge in time and were hit by the bolts. At such a close distance, the tremendous kinetic energy attached to the bolts sent their bodies flying for 30 to 40 feet away. Tens of blood spurted out from their mouths, and left a 100-feet-long trail of blood on the ground. Beside the carriage, besides the man in black who was driving the carriage, there were only 6 young men in green. Wu Qi sneered and continued dashing towards the carriage. He fixed his eyes on the window of the carriage. Behind the green gauze, someone was looking at Wu Qi through the thin bamboo curtain, his eyes filled with surprise and anger. Instinctively, Wu Qi hated this man's gaze. Most of his divine sense was focused on this man, and the 2 prickles were faintly vibrating along with his arms. Once he got close to the carriage, the tips of the prickles would meet the man's heart. "How dare you!" The woman's soft voice rang out again. The young man in green, who was standing beside the carriage, was about to rush out, but the woman sneered and said, "Stop, you are no match for him." A dark shadow silently darted out of the carriage, and floated about a foot above the ground, pouncing towards Wu Qi like a ghost. As soon as the dark shadow appeared, small whirlwinds rose from the surrounding streets. Tens of bull-thick whirlwinds, and a few feet tall, spun along with the dark shadow. A layer of hazy black mist gushed out from the ground, and gradually gathered towards the dark shadow. With a flick of his finger, 2 prickles darted out along with an ear-piercing whistling sound, and hit the dark shadow. The prickles pierced through the dark shadow's body, and flew far away. The dark shadow didn't show any reaction, and was still floating about a foot above the ground, pouncing towards Wu Qi at a moderate speed. Wu Qi was taken aback. He fixed his eyes on the dark shadow, and saw a beautiful lady with a slightly green face amidst the dark mist. She was baring her teeth and grinning at him. It was a very frightening smile. The woman's eyes were faintly glowing with a blood-red light. When her eyes met Wu Qi's, Wu Qi felt chills running down his spine. Gusts of cold wind kept spreading out from the woman's body, rolling up whirlwinds and black mist. Accompanied by a deep laughter that seemed to resound directly in his mind, the strange woman dashed in front of Wu Qi, grabbing his neck with both hands. Wu Qi felt a chill coming from his back. In the middle of the night, under the dim moonlight, a translucent woman was grabbing his neck. He couldn't help but cry out, "Damn it, what are you?" Spreading his hands apart, the innate water energy gathered in his palms, and with all his strength, Wu Qi thrust his palms towards the woman's claws. The woman's soft laughter came from the carriage. "Damn it? Didn't you see a ghost today?" Soundlessly, his palms collided with the woman's claws. Wu Qi felt a gust of cold air rushing up from his palms, and couldn't help but shiver. In a blink of an eye, his fingertips turned black, and his fingers went numb, losing all feeling. The woman's smile froze. The innate water energy was extremely mysterious. It was cultivated by Wu Qi with the help of a thread of innate water energy found in the innate water stone. When the energy rushed into the woman's body, it immediately messed up the flow of energy in her body, and at the same time, a gust of cold air rushed through her body. A chilly wind blew in all directions, and the woman's body suddenly became much dimmer, turning from translucent to almost completely transparent. A shrill scream came from the woman's mouth. She turned around, transformed into a gust of chilly wind, and dashed towards the carriage. From within the carriage came the gentle voice of a woman. "How dare you? You even dared to injure my demonic ghost guards. Are you seeking death?" A beam of red light came from behind, and hit the chilly wind. A loud boom rang out, and a ball of red flame exploded, shattering the chilly wind. Vaguely, a hazy head of a woman could be seen jumping into the carriage and disappearing. Wu Qi quickly turned around. It was Luo Kadi who shot out an explosive talisman and shattered the chilly wind transformed from the demonic ghost. Reluctantly, Wu Qi took a glance at the carriage. His arms were stiff, and his body was shivering. He clenched his teeth and shouted in a low voice, "Retreat! Leave this place as soon as possible." Chapter 67. A bed crossbow used by the City Defense Army and several dozen special crossbow machines capable of firing the three-edged wind-piercing bone-piercing awls, a secret weapon made by the Mahis sect, were found by the soldiers who had just arrived at the base of the wall nearby. Lying next to these weapons were several dozens of dead bodies. Some of them were severely poisoned, and their bodies had shrunk to the size of a toddler. Laughing strangely, Wu Qi exerted his innate water energy with all his strength. A large sheet of misty water vapor rose from them, wrapping them up and bringing them back to the direction of the city wall. Wu Qi glared at Lu Chengfeng, then said with a cold voice, "I won't leave you behind until I'm at the end of my rope. If that happens, I'll definitely leave this place at the fastest speed and avenge you. Now we should still have a chance. Let me think. The soldiers brought by the man in black were not any better. The power of the powder concocted by Wu Qi was comparable to the enhanced tear gas. Hundreds of soldiers were howling and wailing, sneezing and coughing. They were in a complete mess. Their eyes were burning with a severe pain, and tears were rolling down their faces uncontrollably. Their eyes were all red, and how could they still pursue those involved in the case? Those who lived in the inner city were all the nobles and princes of Great Yan Dynasty. These captains were afraid that someone would intrude into these courtyards and alert the nobles. As they were on duty tonight, this was not something they could afford. Using chili powder, they took down the dogs that were tracking them, and using water vapor to block the eyes of those sky patrolling eagle guards, as well as the fact that all of them had the cultivation base of Xiantian realm, Wu Qi and his company came to the city wall without any trouble. Lu Qingfeng wiped off the rainwater from his face and said in a low voice, "I'm afraid we won't be able to leave this place." Looking at Lu Qingfeng, Wu Qi shook his head helplessly and said, "I'll try my best." Since he was going to use this trick, why did he still try so hard to escape just now? From his nose to his lungs, a ball of raging flame was burning fiercely. The man in black rolled and struggled for a while, then fainted from the impact. Mixed with the aura of innate water gang, the water vapor also carried a bit of mystery. High up in the sky, a few sky patrolling eagle guards of scouting office widened their eyes. They kept activating the innate ability of the spirit bird's soul essence, But no matter how hard they tried, they could not see through the water vapor that Wu Qi had rolled up. Abruptly, the man in black let out a miserable howl. The thin yellow dog shadow behind him raised its head towards the sky and let out a few soundless howls. After twitching for a few times, it quickly shrank back into the body of the man in black. The man in black robe howled out, covering his nose with his hand and rolling on the ground. A faintly discernible barking sound came from afar. A few black-clothed men, whose bodies were wrapped in a faint yellow light and had a strangely shaped shadow of a dog floating behind them, rushed to the scene of the crime as fast as lightning. They sniffed the air carefully and sniffed the scent left behind in the surroundings. Then, they quickly led the large group of soldiers down the street. Under the eyes of these men, which were emitting a strange gleam, although it was a pitch-black night, although it was a stormy day, they could still clearly see even a grain of sand on the street. In those luxurious mansions, even the sentries and guards hiding under the bushes could not escape from their divine eyes, which could penetrate 10 feet deep into the ground. Lu Qingfeng was frightened by Wu Qi's loud shout, and his body trembled. He rolled his eyes and glared at Wu Qi. Vaguely, he saw a man in black robe coming from behind, sniffing his nose and bringing a large group of soldiers with him. Not far away from him, a couple of men with shadows of wind-breaking wolves behind their backs were seen flying at top speed. Suddenly, a few huge blue shadows shot up into the sky from a corner of G City. They were a few vague shadows of strange birds with a wingspan of over 50 feet. Within the belly of these strange birds, a few men of scouting office, clad in black soft armors, were shooting out a 1-foot-long blue gleam from their eyes, scanning the area underneath them in a strict manner. The thin yellow dog was a famous dog in this world, the 100-mile sniffing dog, who was born with a very developed sense of smell. After fusing with the soul of the thin dog, this man in black had a very developed sense of smell, and his nose had become very sensitive and fragile. Wu Qi took out a powder mixed with dozens of spicy spices, especially 3 of the strongest wild pepper, and threw it out. The man in black bore the brunt of the powder and took a deep breath. With a strange smile on his face, Wu Qi took out a couple dozens of local spices from his storage bag, which he had collected in Little Meng City. Among them, there was a kind of chili that could make one spit fire, and star anise cinnamon that could make one faint. The natural energy in this world was many times denser than the earth, and the efficacy of all kinds of spices produced here was also many times stronger. Using lethal weapons in G City, and even activating the city defense mechanism in an alleyway, no doubt, this was a big case. No matter who was the mastermind behind this case, someone would have to face the consequences. Muffled sounds of footsteps were heard coming from everywhere. The boots issued to the City Defense Army of G City were made from cow tendons, with steel wires coiled on the inside and steel sheets on the outside. When these boots collided with the stone pavement on the street, the loud noises produced were deafening. The shrill whistles spread far and wide, and the dozens of arrow towers and sentry posts on the city walls of G City began to light up. It was unknown what kind of equipment was used, but from the arrow towers and sentry posts, beams of 2 feet thick yellow light that could reach a distance of a few miles were shot out. Like sharp blades, they tore apart the curtain of night and swept across the area underneath. When the barking from behind was less than 200 feet away, Wu Qi sneered and casually threw the handful of powder up into the sky. The powerful innate water energy mixed with the powder had unleashed a miraculous effect. Wherever the powder passed, all the raindrops avoided it. The storm could do nothing to the powder, and the strong wind blew the powder away along the street. Suddenly, Wu Qi sprung to his feet, mustered all his innate energy and cried out, "I'm the best friend of Sir Yen Bugui, scouting officer. We were robbed in G City and killed for our money. Help me, help me. Yen Bugui, if you don't come out and save us, I'll fuck all 18 generations of your ancestors." A thunderclap came from the sky. Dark clouds covered the bright moon, and the storm came without warning. The strong wind blew the raindrops, lashing the streets and alleyways of G City like countless whips. Water vapor rose up into the air, and no one could be seen 3 steps away from them. Hiding in a dark corner with the help of the water vapor, Wu Qi looked at the brightly lit city gate that led to the outer layer of the city. However, if he wanted to return to Lu Qingfeng's mansion, there were still 2 layers of city walls along the way. At the moment, not only were the city walls densely guarded by soldiers, they were also embedded with a great number of warning formations. If Wu Qi was alone, he would still have the confidence to escape by relying on the escaping and concealing technique he learned from Scroll of Stealing. However, if he had to bring Lu Qingfeng and the others with him, he had no confidence at all. Looking at the shadowy blue bird that was flying high above his head, the wind-breaking wolves that were flying across the buildings in the distance, and the barking that came from behind him, Wu Qi breathed out a deep sigh. So this was the imperial city of Great Yan Dynasty. With such a tight defense, how could anyone survive? First, over 10,000 soldiers had completely sealed off the few streets in the vicinity. After that, all the capable men from related government offices in Ji City had arrived. Not long after that, a shrill howl of a wolf was heard coming from the sky. Over 200 men of scouting officer, who were shrouded in a green glow and had the shadowy figure of a wind-breaking wolf looming behind their backs, leaped out from all directions. With the crime scene as the center, they quickly searched the surroundings. Thunderbolts were rolling and rocking above their heads. Electric arcs that looked like silver snakes kept piercing down from the dark clouds. Currently, they could still hide under the cover of the water vapor, but when more and more soldiers arrived and when they began to comb through the entire area, they would no longer be able to hide any longer. Lu Qingfeng was lured and killed right after he arrived at Ji City. No one could tell who was a friend and who was a foe. Perhaps when they were discovered, the second wave of assassins from the enemy would arrive right after. Footsteps like this could be heard coming from all directions. A large number of soldiers had taken control of the few streets in the vicinity, sealing off all the entrances and exits. The front doors of a few mansions in the vicinity were knocked on loudly. Captains who led their soldiers to the scene kept shouting and informing the people in those mansions about what happened outside, requesting the owners of those mansions to send out their personal guards and search through their own mansions, preventing any intruders. Taking advantage of the strong wind and heavy rain, Wu Qi and his company were nearly caught by a beam of light. If not because Wu Qi suddenly sensed danger and grabbed hold of Lu Qingfeng, who was sprinting forward, their whereabouts would have been exposed. Wu Qi gnashed his teeth and said, "We have to leave even if we can't. Before you become Zhuguixing, you can't fall into their hands. Or else, you won't even know how you died." Quickly glancing around, Wu Qi said with a ferocious voice, "Rest assured, young master. You're the first friend Wu Qi has after leaving the mountain. If you die in Ji City, I'll definitely avenge you. I swear I'll wipe out the entire clan of those who harmed you." He reached out his hand and crushed all the spices, especially the large handful of chili peppers. Then he unleashed his innate water energy through his body, controlling the water vapor in the surroundings and making it spin slowly around Wu Qi and his company. The innate water energy could control all the water element energy under the heaven. In an instant, the area of 10 feet around Wu Qi and his company was completely emptied. With great effort, he kneaded the spices, and in just a short period of time, he had produced 7 to 8 kilograms of mixed powder. Even though the weather was extremely bad, it seemed like these men in black could still capture some insignificant aura amidst the wind and rain. Clearing his throat, Lu Qingfeng looked at Wu Qi with a slightly bleak expression and said, "Wu Qi, if you have the confidence, just run back alone. I'll take the risk. Those who want to kill me can't really bribe all the city guards of Ji City, can they? If I don't die, that will be the best. But if I do die, just avenge me." Lu Qingfeng gazed at Wu Qi with a hidden bitterness, sighed and said, "Thank you for avenging me. But can you give me some good news? For example, can you bring me back safely?" The barking from behind was getting closer and closer. The aura of Wu Qi and his company had been captured by those men in black. Wu Qi sneered and said, "It seems like these beast warriors are able to borrow the soul essence of wild beasts and unleash their innate ability to the maximum. What is the weakness of a dog?" Once again, he couldn't help but feel a ball of anger rising in his heart. With such a tight defense, they could still play an ambush. If not for the fact that all 4 of them were Xiantian experts who had concealed their aura of Xiantian realm using aura-concealing talismans, they would have been killed by those men when they were caught unprepared. How could the public security of G City be so bad? At this moment, a heavy rain was falling from the sky, and the power of innate water energy had increased by 3 times in this heavy rain. Wu Qi's voice was louder than the rumbling of thunder, rolling and spreading over 20 miles away. Chapter 68. Immediately, a group of dozens of scouting officers who were passing by them leaped towards them. Accompanied by a faint howl of a wolf, a wild wind filled with wood elemental energies came blowing towards them. A man, clad in a black soft armor and carrying a sharp sword on his back, dressed in the same manner as Yen Bugui, had surrounded Wu Qi and his companions. Wu Qi's voice was a little too loud, and the commotion caused by him was a little too loud. From afar, beams of blue light were seen shooting up into the sky. Nearly 100 sky patrolling eagle guards were flying towards them at top speed, accompanied by ear-splitting bird cries. The howl of the wolf could be heard coming from both near and far. It was as if the entire G City had turned into a den of wild wolves. The howl of the wolf could be heard coming from everywhere, and one green figure after another was seen sprinting towards Wu Qi and his companions. In just the time it took to finish a pot of tea, nearly 100 sky patrolling eagle guards had gathered in the sky and were wheeling at top speed. The shadows of strange blue birds were stirring up a strong wind, causing the raindrops to shoot down like bullets. Over 300 scouting officers, who had fused with the soul of wind-breaking wolf, had arrived at the scene as well. The surrounding walls were fully occupied by the men of scouting officers. Following that, a dozen of rough lion roars came from afar. Dozens of burly men, clad in heavy armor, their bodies shrouded in blazing flames, and having the soul of a flaming lion behind their backs, each having a height of 40 to 80 feet tall, arrived with a large group of soldiers. Everyone had their eyes fixed on Wu Qi with a strange look in their eyes. Among the last group of burly men, the one with the soul of a flaming lion behind his back was an 80 feet tall, emitting a rolling heat current. When the raindrops came close to him, they would turn into water vapor and disperse. The burly man, whose body was shrouded in a thick layer of white water vapor, strode forward. Relying on the fact that he was 1.5 feet taller than Wu Qi, he looked down at Wu Qi from above, sizing him up for a while. Yen Bugui's best friend? Fuck his best friend from 18 generations ago? Yen Bugui is such a lucky guy. Wu Qi twitched his lips and let out a dry laugh. The aura emitted from this burly man was way too frightening. It was strong, majestic, and extremely violent. This was a true embryonic breath-level expert, unlike Old Devil and Lord Flame who used evil methods to break through. He was a true expert who had built a solid foundation step by step and broke through step by step. With a hollow laugh, Wu Qi cupped his hands towards the man who looked to be in his 30s and said, "May I know the general's name?" The man chuckled, slapped heavily on Wu Qi's shoulder and said, "My surname is Ji, and my surname is Yen, Yen as in Yen Bugui. My name is Yen Jiuhui, the chief supervisor of West Wind Guard of Great Yen Dynasty's scouting office, and I am Yen Bugui's grandfather. Didn't you just say that you wanted to fuck his 18 generations of ancestors?" The scouting office of Great Yen Dynasty was divided into 5 major wind guards: North, South, East, West, and Central. They were responsible for all the affairs of the vassal kingdoms in the 4 directions of Great Yen Dynasty, as well as the Great Yen Dynasty itself. The chief supervisor was the highest executive officer of a wind guard. He had the right to act first and report later. In fact, most of the time, even if he acted first without reporting, no one would investigate the details. Cold sweat broke out from Lu Chengfeng's forehead. The West Wind Guard of Scouting Office was responsible for monitoring all vassal kingdoms in the west of Great Yen Dynasty. The Lu Kingdom was one of those vassal kingdoms in the west of Great Yen Dynasty. From a certain point of view, the West Wind Guard was a sharp blade that hung above the head of many influential clans in Lu Kingdom. Although Great Yen Dynasty never meddled in the internal affairs of vassal kingdoms, but if the chief supervisor of West Wind Guard really wanted to meddle in the affairs of Lu Kingdom, who would dare to say no? Who would dare to say no? If Yen Jiuhui said he wanted to punish the Lu Kingdom, there would be many people who would jump up and smash the Lu Kingdom's head. Letting out a dry cough, Lu Qingfeng took 2 steps forward, bowed to Yan Jiuhui and said, "Chief Supervisor, Qingfeng, offer my greetings." Yan Jiuhui let out a few laughs, waved his hand at Lu Qingfeng, laughed and said, "Don't talk nonsense. So many people have heard what this little fellow said just now. I, Yan Jiuhui, am a man with a strong foundation and reputation in Ji City. Now that I'm insulted by this little fellow, how am I going to face anyone in the future?" He fiercely glared at Wu Qiyan, who acted as if nothing had happened. Then, Yan Jiuhui smacked his lips, stared at Lu Qingfeng, sneered and said, "Who are you? What is going on tonight?" A 3 miles long section of the mountain collapsing wall has collapsed. Who has such a deep blood feud with you and wants to kill you? Stretching out his hand, Yan Jiuhui grabbed towards Lu Qingfeng's neck. He let out a loud laugh and said, Why am I wasting my time talking with you little kids? I'll capture them and interrogate them. What do you think I don't know? Boys, I've captured them. Prepare your weapons and let them have a good time." Wu Qi came before Lu Qingfeng, stretched out his hand and thrust his palm towards Yan Jiuhui's wrist. With an indifferent tone, Wu Qi said, "Why are you so angry, Chief Supervisor? I was forced to be rude. If I didn't shout at you, I'm afraid all of you will lose your lives." Looking at how Wu Qi dared to attack him, a fiery gleam flickered in Yan Jiuhui's eyes. Suddenly he burst out into a loud laughter. He retracted his palm and changed it into a fist, thrusting it towards Wu Qi's palm. He laughed and said, "Good. If you can defeat me, I'll take care of everything that happened tonight for you." As the fist and the palm collided, Wu Qi felt as if a huge mountain was pressing down on him. The tremendous force made him lose his balance. With a muffled groan, he was forced to take a few steps back. The scorching hot fist force blasted into the meridians of Wu Qi's arm. However, it just so happened that it was neutralized by the cold aura that invaded his meridians from the demonic ghost. Water and fire were mutually restraining each other. The cold aura and hot aura quickly neutralized each other. The internal energy in Wu Qi's meridians fluctuated. His arm, which was a little stiff a moment ago, immediately returned to normal. However, Yan Jiuhui's body shook. When his fist landed on the center of Wu Qi's palm, even though he managed to repel Wu Qi, his body was twisted by the peculiar whirlpool-like energy in the center of Wu Qi's palm. As a result, 80% of the fist force missed its target. His body trembled. The fist force that he had blasted into the air pulled his body backward, staggering for a dozen steps. After that, he punched the wall on the side of the road, creating a big hole. "Good fist force." Wu Qi cried out. "Good fist force." Yan Jiuhui retracted his fist with astonishment. He fiercely gazed at Wu Qi from top to bottom and said, "At such a young age, you have already reached the realm of Xiandan. That young man just now called himself Qingfeng? Could he be Lu Qingfeng? Little fellow, don't tell me you are his hangern Wu Qi?" Lu Qingfeng was overjoyed. He quickly answered, "Chief Supervisor, have you heard of the name Qingfeng?" Yan Jiuhui spat on the ground, slapped on his forehead forcefully and cried out, "That bastard Yan Bugui had mentioned you before. What are you doing in Ji City instead of waiting for the reward in the Lu Kingdom?" A light howl of a wolf was heard. Bringing together a few men, Yan Bugui came rushing towards them from a far distance. A green shadow flashed past, as Yan Bugui leaped and landed on the street. He gave Wu Qi a look and said happily, "So it is you. Wu Qi, your mouth is really hard to enjoy." Shaking his head, Yan Bugui turned to Yan Jiuhui and reported, "Chief Supervisor, Lu Qingfeng might be the descendant of Duke Yanlu. The reason he came here this time should be because he was going to the imperial family court to confirm his bloodline, so that he could enter the family register and inherit the title of Duke Yanlu and the position of West Supervisor." Yan Bugui smiled at Lu Qingfeng, then said with a deep voice, "I've just received the news that the imperial family court, Duke Yuxian, is coming here with Mistress Riyang." Upon hearing Yan Bugui's words, Yan Jiuhui's expression turned extremely strange. He gave Lu Qingfeng a glance from head to toe for a while, then suddenly turned to look at Wu Qi and sneered, 18 generations of ancestors? 18 generations of ancestors. Yen Jiuhui sneered for no reason, then cried out with a deep voice, "Why did you only know about this news now? Someone has mobilized the military bed crossbows in G City, and even used the wind-breaking bone-piercing awl, which especially used to target Xiantian warriors. Why didn't the imperial family court report about this? They even used the mountain-crushing wall just to kill Lu. Young Master Lu, who is so bold to do that?" Yen Bugui bowed at Yen Jiuhui, smiled bitterly and said, "The bed crossbows were mobilized from the 4th Battalion of Yellow City Defense Army. Who is the one behind this? The thread has been cut off. The treasurer who was in charge of the ordnance of the 4th Battalion had just died in the bed of his concubine. And the news about Mistress Riang paying a secret visit to Duke Yuxian has been blocked by someone. I just received this news just now." The faces of Wu Qi, Lu Chengfeng, and Yen Jiuhui changed instantly. Wu Qi gave Lu Chengfeng a look, while Lu Chengfeng shook his head with a gloomy face. On the other side, Yen Jiuhui sneered and said, "Very well, someone even dares to tamper with the information in the imperial family court. Who is it?" Yen Bugui coughed lightly, then spat out a name, Qin Qingshui. Yen Jiuhui's face turned even uglier. He stamped his feet, sneered and said, "He is really unscrupulous. Does he really think that no one can control him?" Before his words could fade away, someone had already answered with a shrill voice, "Yen Jiuhui, don't tell me that the unscrupulous man you mentioned is me?" A series of rapid footsteps was heard. A middle-aged man, who had a face like a donkey, and was only 2/3 the width of a normal person, and looked as skinny as a cleaver, was swaggering towards them. Amidst the raging storm, this man was clad in a very loose white robe. The robe was fluttering in the wind, as if it could bring his skinny and scrawny body up into the sky. This man was Qin Qingshui, the chief supervisor of the Central Wind Guard of Great Yen Dynasty's scouting office. He was in charge of all the scouting office in all the territories directly under the jurisdiction of Great Yen Dynasty. At the same time, he had a certain degree of supervision over the East, South, West, and North Wind Guards of Scouting Office. Qin Qingshui's white robe was flapping noisily due to the strong wind. Arrogantly, he pointed his finger at Lu Chengfeng, sneered and said, "This man is suspected of murdering the hostage of Xian Kingdom, Taba Qingye. Somebody, bring him and all his accomplices back and interrogate them. Find out how they got their hands on the bed crossbows and bone-breaking awls from the army. We have to find out who is the one who colluded with him, giving him the courage to commit a crime in G City." Lu Chengfeng stared at Qin Qingshui with great surprise. With a stern voice, he said, "Your Excellency, it was me who was ambushed and killed." Qin Qingshui rolled his eyes, shook his head and sneered, "What a joke! Do you think I'm blind? Obviously, it was you who colluded with the scum of the army, setting up an ambush to assassinate the hostage of Xian Kingdom. Somebody, capture this fellow and all his accomplices." Wu Qi knitted his brows into a tight frown. This Qin Qingshui was here for Lu Chengfeng. On the other side, Lu Chengfeng had his eyes fixed on Qin Qingshui. He had no idea why this man was targeting him. Yen Jiuhui's eyes went wide, then he cried out with a deep voice, "Qin Qingshui, things are not like what you said." He stretched out his hand and stopped the large group of men behind Qin Qingshui. Qin Qingshui tilted his head up and stared at the dark clouds and lightning bolts in the sky. With an indifferent voice, he said, "Yen Jiuhui, don't you forget that this is G City, and I'm the chief supervisor of Central Wind Guard of Scouting Office. Whatever is happening here is not under your jurisdiction, so you can't interfere with it." Slapping Yen Jiuhui's arm away with his palm, Qin Qingshui cried out sternly, "Somebody, take him away and throw him into the prison of Scouting Office." A group of beast warriors immediately leaped forward like wolves and tigers. Chapter 69. Lu Chengfeng just let 2 beast warriors of Scouting Office grab his hands. Among the beast warriors brought here by Qin Qingshui, more than half of them had the soul of a flying bear with a single horn and a pair of wings behind their back, and a strange-looking wild boar, which had 4 tusks protruding from its mouth and was covered in needle-like hair, treading on flaming clouds. The strength of these flying bear beast warriors was incredible. As soon as Lu Chengfeng's arms were grabbed by them, he felt his entire body go numb and could no longer move. The same went for Luo Kadi and Ma Liang. In front of the two chief supervisors of scouting office, they had no courage to resist. Just like Lu Chengfeng, they had a deep reverence for everything in Great Yan Dynasty. Therefore, when Qin Qingshui ordered his men to capture them, how could they dare to resist? Only Wu Qi took a step back casually. The tip of his foot brushed across the puddles on the ground, stirring up a stream of water vapor and avoiding the clutches of two beast warriors. He stared at Qin Qingshui with a faint smile on his face. He had prepared himself to kill Qin Qingshui with all his might, and if he failed, he would immediately activate the escape art of innate water element and flee. Never place your safety in the hands of others. This was the biggest advice Wu Wang and Lu Xiaobai had given to Wu Qi. Lu Chengfeng, Luo Kadi, and Ma Liang did not dare to resist, but Wu Qi dared. Not only did he dare to resist, he even dared to try and kill Qin Qingshui with all his might before he fled. Seeing Wu Qi take a step back and avoid the clutches of his own subordinates, Qin Qingshui bellowed furiously, "How dare you?" Wu Qi just smiled faintly, narrowing his eyes as he stared at Qin Qingshui. He had his back against a wall, carefully keeping a certain distance from the men of scouting office. A large sheet of water vapor was hovering and twirling around him, making his body look hazy and blurry. The onlookers suddenly had an illusion that Wu Qi could vanish from the water vapor at any time. A deep, muffled roar of a boar rang out. Behind Qin Qingshui, a beast warrior with a beast soul of a red wild boar on his back suddenly lowered his head, turned his body into a violent storm, and slammed toward Wu Qi with a deep, muffled whistle. The man lowered his head and slammed at an incredible speed, forcibly breaking through the rainstorm and creating a white curtain of water. His body was covered by a rolling energy, knocking away countless raindrops and shooting in all directions like bullets. Wu Qi grinned and took a step to the side. Then he reached out his hand and grabbed the man's neck, pressing his entire body against the wall behind him. With a loud bang, the ground shook, and the crisp sound of dozens of bones breaking could be heard. This person's entire body sank into the thick wall. Blood slowly seeped out from the broken wall, and soon, the puddles on the ground were dyed red. He knew Wu Qi was a bold man, but he never thought that Wu Qi would be so bold as to kill Qin Qingshui's subordinate right in front of him. He knew that Wu Qi was a brave man, but never in his wildest dreams did he expect that Wu Qi would be so bold as to kill his subordinate right in front of Qin Qingshui. He was a man of scouting office, and a man who served right beside the chief supervisor of Central Wind Guard. Luo Kadi and Ma Liang were struck dumb. Was there really someone who was not afraid of death? Was there really someone who dared to provoke scouting office in the imperial city of Great Yan Dynasty? This was no longer a question of whether he had the guts or not. He was simply a simpleton. Even when the monarch of the Lu Kingdom came to Ji City, he still had to bow and say good things about him. As for Wu Qi, he was just a hanger-on of Lu Chengfeng. Although he was the so-called chief hanger-on, wasn't he still a hanger-on? Meanwhile, Yan Zhuhui and Yan Bugui took a deep breath at the same time, then exhaled comfortably. Yan Bugui gave Wu Qi a deep look and secretly gave him a thumbs up. On the other side, Yan Zhuhui was clapping his hands openly, laughing out loud and saying, "Good, good lad. You have guts, you do have guts." For so many years, it has been a long time since a young man dared to act like you. Qin Qingshui, this little boy, I want him. Qin Qingshui was so angry that his body was trembling. He glared at Yan Zhuhui furiously and cried out in a hoarse voice, "How presumptuous! How dare you! How dare you kill a man of scouting office? Where are you from? Where do you live? Somebody, find out who his 9 clan members are, search his house, wipe out his entire clan, and wipe out his sect." Qin Qingshui was so angry that his hair was standing straight up. He clenched his fists tightly, and a cold gleam was shooting out from his eyes. Suddenly, a dark green mist sprayed out from his back. Amidst the mist that was rolling and rolling like water, a 3-headed giant serpent with a bronze body and countless green, red, and blue spots slowly raised its head up. 18 large eyes were fixed on the 3 heads of the serpent, staring straight at Wu Qi. Taking a glance at the three-headed giant serpent behind Qin Qingshui, Wu Qi sneered and said, "So, it is a lower-tier spirit beast, the dark nether python. Chief Supervisor Qin, you are being unreasonable. This subordinate of yours committed suicide by ramming his head into a wall. What does that have to do with me?" Committed suicide by ramming his head into a wall? Qin Qingshui was so angry that his eyeballs nearly popped out from his eye sockets. Yan Jiuhui suddenly burst into a loud laughter. He laughed so hard that his body rocked back and forth and nearly fell to the ground. Patting his belly, he burst out laughing and said, "That's right, I can testify for you. Even if I have to face the chief general, I'll still say the same thing. This damned kid committed suicide by ramming his head into a wall. It has nothing to do with anyone else." Upon hearing Yan Jiuhui's joke, Qin Qingshui let out a strange cry. He spun his body, and the white robe he wore began to sway like a whirlwind, while countless raindrops began to spin around his body at a high speed. The dark nether python behind his back opened its mouth wide and thrust forward. Qin Qingshui's body froze in midair, then shot towards Wu Qi at lightning speed. The index finger of his right hand was like the tongue of a poisonous python, thrusting straight towards the center of Wu Qi's brows. Amidst a sizzling noise, a 3-feet-long finger beam darted out from Qin Qingshui's fingertip, bringing along a cold breeze as it shot straight towards Wu Qi. Wu Qi's face turned cold. The inexhaustible energy in his arms surged like tidewater, producing a strong and violent sound of waves slapping against the shore. The energy whirlpool in the center of his palm was spinning at an incredible speed. The endless water element energies in the heavy rain kept fusing into Wu Qi's palms, gathering in the center of his palms. He had accumulated the strongest force in his current stage, waiting to kill Qin Qingshui, then escape with the help of the water element. He had prepared to take out the innate water serpent pill from the storage bag. Once Qin Qingshui was killed, he would take out the pill and use the enormous energy contained within to cast the escape art. With his current cultivation, he could at most run 3 to 5 miles away with the escape art. However, with the help of the innate water serpent pill, he could at least run 500 miles away in one breath. Staring fixedly at the approaching finger of Qin Qingshui, Wu Qi slightly raised both of his palms, getting ready to kill him with all his strength. The jade-breaking palm, a secret skill learned in Scroll of Stealing, was ready to be unleashed. The innate water energy was rolling and rocking in a few specific meridians in his palms, stacking and strengthening, gradually forming into an explosive force. Right at this moment, a coach suddenly came speeding towards them. A vigorous and forceful voice was heard, "Marty Qing Ho, please wait." Qin Qingshui's body suddenly turned stiff. With a leap, he leaped hundreds of feet up into the sky. His white robe was blown by the wind, bringing him back like a sail. A group of guards clad in sackcloth, their clothes full of patches, escorted a shabby coach. All the paint on the coach had peeled off, and there were a few large holes on the roof of the coach, through which the wind and rain poured into the coach. Among the 4 wheels of the coach, 3 of them had their spokes peeled off. Every time the coach moved, the wheels would produce a creaking noise, as if they were going to fall apart at any time. As for the animal that pulled the coach, Wu Qi had no idea whether he should call it a horse or something else. In short, the animal was so skinny that he could see 2 rows of ribs, and was foaming at the mouth. It staggered a few steps towards Wu Qi, but because of its lack of strength, its legs gave way, and it nearly knelt down on the ground. Naturally, the man who came here with such a splendid coach was none other than the current Duke of Yanxing, the Grandmaster of Great Yan Dynasty's imperial family court, Duke Yuxian. Gasping for breath, Yuxian came out from the coach, waved his hand and said, "Who is Lu Chengfeng? Come here." Wu Qi pointed his finger at Lu Chengfeng, whose shoulders were being grabbed by 2 beast warriors, smiled and said, "Your Excellency, this is my young master." Yuxian gave them a glance, snorted coldly and said, "Qin Qingshui, let him go, and stop talking nonsense." Qin Qingshui's expression changed. He bowed respectfully at Yuxian and slightly shook his head. Both beast warriors quickly let go of Lu Chengfeng's hand. Smilingly, Wu Qi dispersed the jade-breaking palm energy that he had gathered in his palm, then accompanied Lu Chengfeng and came next to Yu Xian's coach. Through the broken window of the coach, Wu Qi could see Tai Yuewu sitting in the coach with a gloomy face, staring blankly at the rainwater that was pouring down from the hole of the coach roof. The rainwater was dripping, drenching Tai Yuewu's expensive and luxurious palace dress. The complicated hair bun that she had tied up with great effort was now messed up by the wind and rain. Lu Chengfeng looked at Tai Yuewu in shock, asked with a low voice, "Mother, this is—" With a feeble voice, Tai Yuewu introduced Yu Xian's identity. Lu Chengfeng quickly bowed and greeted Yu Xian. Wu Qi narrowed his eyes and gave Yu Xian an appraising glance. Before coming here, he had learned from Lu Qiulua, the chief supervisor of Lu clan of Liang in Ji City, that Yu Xian was greedy and lustful. His greed and hypocrisy were well known in Ji City. He threw a glance at Yu Xian's ragged and coarse cloth, then quickly glanced at the corner of his underwear made from the silk of 1,000 years old ice silkworm that was accidentally revealed. Without saying anything, Wu Qi pulled Lu Chengfeng and took a few steps aside, whispering something to him. Upon hearing Wu Qi's words, Lu Chengfeng was startled, then he nodded his head heavily. When Yu Xian saw Wu Qi retreating with Lu Chengfeng, he put on a straight face and knitted his brows unhappily. But soon, Wu Qi came up to Yu Xian again, lowered his voice and said, "Duke Yu Xian, can you let my young master take over everything left behind by Duke Yen Lu as soon as possible and smoothly as I can by offering a province of great Yen dynasty to you?" Yu Xian was taken aback. It was as if he suddenly saw countless golden gleams blinking and blinking in front of him. It was the golden gleam emitted by the convergence of numerous golden mountains. He cried out in shock, "The land of a county? Give it to me? I'm an honest man, and I've never been greedy for any ill-gotten gains." Yu Xian swallowed a mouthful of saliva, lowered his voice again and said, "But, the land of a county? Your young master has it? Is your young master willing to give it to you? You should have told me earlier. If you had told me there was a land of a county, I would have done everything beautifully when you came to the city. As long as I can confirm that your young master is the son of Duke Yen Lu, everything left behind by Duke Yen Lu will naturally be inherited by him." With a deep voice, Wu Qi said, "Of course, the land of a county. I suppose Duke Yu Xian should know that Chief General once offered a reward for a land of a county." Whispering to Yu Xian, he explained how he and Lu Chengfeng assisted Yen Bugue in accomplishing the mission, then Wu Qi told Yu Xian everything that happened. Once again, he promised Yu Xian that as long as Lu Chengfeng inherited everything that belonged to Yen Buji, he would give the land of a county that was offered by Chief General Jing Ku to Yu Xian. Of course, Yu Xian had to make sure that the reward for a land of a county would be given to Lu Chengfeng. Yu Xian licked his lips with great difficulty, then said with a dry voice, "I'm an honest man. But it would be disrespectful to refuse a land of a county, and I have no choice but to accept it." Taking a deep breath, Yu Xian pointed his finger at Qin Qingshui and suddenly broke out into curses. "Qin Qingshui, have you gone mad or what? Do you think you can offend the young master of Duke Yenlu? How many bribes have you accepted from others that made you have the audacity to make things difficult for Chengfeng? Don't you know that once his identity is confirmed, he will be a core member of Imperial Clan of Great Yen Dynasty? You have taken bribes and bent the law. I can't tolerate any sand in my eyes, and I will definitely report you to the Chief General." Slapping hard on Lu Chengfeng's shoulder, Yu Xian cried out sternly, "Let's go! Summon all the imperial elders of Imperial Family Court and confirm Chengfeng's identity with a drop of blood." The strong wind blew and the heavy rain fell. Everyone on the scene was struck dumb. Summoning all the imperial elders of Imperial Family Court in the middle of the night? What was wrong with Yu Xian? Chapter 70. Thunder rumbled, lightning bolts danced wildly, and heavy rain poured down. The drainage system of Ji City was excellent. Despite the heavy rain, there was not a single puddle on the street. A large group of people was marching on the street, consisting of soldiers from City Defense Army, Scouting Office, and the men from Imperial Family Court brought here by Yu Xian. Walking along the main road in the center of Ji City, The group quickly came to the entrance of Great Yan Dynasty's imperial palace. With Yu Xian calling for the entrance, the heavy palace gate of Great Yan Dynasty, standing 120 feet tall and 6 feet thick, slowly opened up, revealing a pitch-black tunnel behind it. The walls on both sides of the tunnel were 220 feet tall, and the width of the tunnel was only 24 feet. Walking in the tunnel and looking at the dark sky filled with flashing lightning and rumbling thunder, it gave one an extremely oppressive and uneasy feeling of killing and heaviness. Every 300 feet, there was a bridge built on both sides of the tunnel. Not only was it convenient for the soldiers on both sides of the wall, it was also a very powerful defensive measure. As long as a team of archers was deployed on the bridge, and together with the soldiers on both sides of the wall, they would be able to attack the enemies in the tunnel from all angles without any blind spots. The clattering of hooves could be heard, and the oppressive atmosphere was getting stronger and stronger. After walking along the tunnel for 7 miles and passing through a thick and heavy alloy door, the tunnel suddenly opened up, revealing a group of magnificent palaces. On top of the thick and heavy pyramid-shaped stone platform, layers upon layers of palaces, mainly dark green in color, were stacked on top of each other. From the bottom to the top, the palaces had a total of 9 floors. The tallest palace was over 1,000 feet above the ground. The dark clouds were almost sticking to the roofs of the few palaces, and the lightning bolts were shooting down through the dark glazed tiles on the palaces. It was as if the few palaces were built in the sky, looming amidst the dark clouds and lightning bolts, giving them a very mysterious appearance. From what Wu Qi could see, the width of this group of palaces was about 5 miles from east to west. 9 floors of palaces, over 1,000 feet tall from the bottom to the top, and there were at least 20 to 30,000 pavilions and pavilions. Although the style of the palaces was a little monotonous, as they were basically printed from the same mold, with 3, 6, and 9 rooms and tall eaves, the atmosphere was still indescribable with words. After entering the Xiantian realm, a martial artist's spiritual sense would be 100 times sharper than an ordinary martial artist's. Moreover, Wu Qi had fused with a lot of soul particles, which had strengthened his soul by several times. His soul sense could basically be compared to a real Taoist master of embryonic breath tier. Countless sharp murderous auras were faintly discernible in the layers of palaces ahead. Wu Qi could clearly sense that there were at least tens of thousands of elite experts hiding in this vast expanse of palaces. More than 1,000 of them were at the peak of the Hotian realm, and more than 100 of them were at the Xiantian realm. There were also some subtle and unfathomable auras hidden among them. Wu Qi didn't dare to guess what realm they were at. A water-dipper-thick bolt of lightning struck down from the dark clouds and struck on a golden statue standing on the square in front of the palace. In front of the main hall of Great Yan Dynasty's imperial palace, there was a huge square, measuring about 5 miles in both width and length. On this square, there were 8 rows and 8 rows of 64 metal statues, each more than 100 feet tall. All the statues looked exactly the same. They were all mighty warriors, clad in heavy armor and holding long swords in their hands. The bolt of lightning struck on one of the golden statues. The violent electric current surged through the statue, and immediately, a blinding blue light burst out from the statue. A tremendous electric current was surging and rocking within the statue, stimulating it and causing thousands of palm-sized runes and runes to emerge on its surface. The translucent blue runes were wheeling and wheeling on the surface of the statue, while a powerful aura that could make one feel suffocated was vaguely spreading out in all directions. What a powerful defensive formation! Wu Qi gasped and gave these metal statues a cautious look. Led by Yu Xian, the company took a detour around the palaces in front of them and went straight to the back garden of Great Yan Dynasty's imperial palace through a main road at the side. Here, Wu Qi saw the true core of Great Yan Dynasty. It was a small grassland with a circumference of a few acres, and a few old pine trees were growing in a disorderly manner. Right in the middle of the grassland was a thatched cottage, which was built using wood and covered with straw. It measured over 100 feet in both width and length. With this thatched cottage as the center, there were 8 smaller cottages arranged in the shape of 9 palaces. The cottage in the middle was as simple as it could be, but the 8 smaller cottages on the outside were much better. Although they were built in the same simple style, at least they were made of bricks, earth, and wood, and the roof was covered with glazed tiles. At least, they didn't have to worry about being blown away by a strong wind. A bolt of lightning flashed across the sky. With the bright light, Wu Qi saw a plaque hanging on top of the cottage in the middle, with 3 characters written on it, Yan Fei Tian. Wu Qi had no idea who wrote these 3 characters, but the strokes were swift and fierce, as if there was a real rare bird rubbing its fists and palms on the ground, getting ready to soar into the sky with the help of the wind. Bolts of lightning flashed across the sky, and the pale green characters of Yan Fei Tian kept flashing before everyone's eyes. Wu Qi and those who had a strong cultivation base could still stand straight, but for those who had a weaker cultivation base, when they stared at the 3 characters for a long time, their bodies began to tremble, and they couldn't even stand straight. Some of them even fell to the ground in a sorry state. Yu Xian was holding a shabby umbrella that was full of holes, standing in front of the cottage and staring blankly at the 3 characters on the plaque. Over 2,000 years ago, the founding ancestor of Great Yan Dynasty, together with many of his disciples and people, built this meeting hall using only a piece of wood and a handful of grass. 2,000 years later, Great Yan Dynasty has a population of hundreds of millions of people, countless cities, and a boundless territory. But this place is still the true heart of Great Yan Dynasty. Yu Xian used a slightly fanatical and worshipful tone to slowly tell the story to Wu Qi, to Lu Chengfeng, and even to Tai Yu. Not only him, even Yan Zhouhui, Yan Bugui, and a few other men, when they saw this crude cottage, had their bodies straightened up, and their faces were filled with an indescribable holiness and solemnity. Over 2,000 years ago, the emperor of Yan, Yan Dan, brought together several dozens of hanger-ons and several tens of thousands of people, and built the first crude cottage in this place. Using this place as the starting point, they worked hard to build the current Great Yan Dynasty, using only a piece of wood and a handful of grass. As one of his people, as his direct descendant, Yu Xian had temporarily forgotten about all the gold, silver, and jewelry in this place, which was like a sacred place of religion. This was the meeting hall where Yan Dan and his men used to sit 2,000 years ago, and it was also the location of the imperial family court, which was used by Great Yan Dynasty to handle all the affairs related to the imperial clan and vassal kingdoms. Suddenly, Qin Qingshui broke the atmosphere that was like a religious ceremony. Duke Yu Xian, please continue with your work. Qingshui will escort you to this place, and I won't be involved in anything else. The hostage of Xian Kingdom, Taba Qingye, has been killed. I hope Duke Yu Xian can give Qingshui an explanation later. Yu Xian snorted coldly, gave Qin Qingshui a glance, and waved his hand non-committally. Qin Qingshui gave Lu Chengfeng and Wu Qi a deep look, snorted coldly as well, and left with a large group of subordinates behind him. Tonight's incident wasn't completely solved yet. At least, he still needed to personally handle the scene of the assassination. On the other side, Yan Zhouhui let out a loud laugh and said, Ji City is not under the jurisdiction of West Wind Guard. TSK, this has nothing to do with us. We're just here to watch the fun. Hehe, Lu Chengfeng, before your identity is confirmed, I'll let Lao Tzu call you a little brat a few more times. Haha. Yan Zhouhui was laughing complacently, but Yan Bugui had a strange expression on his face. He kept giving Lu Chengfeng a glance from top to bottom, then suddenly breathed out a sigh. Wu Qi nodded his head and smiled at Yan Bugui. On the other hand, Yan Bugui returned a smile back to Wu Qi listlessly. Once again he used that strange gaze to look at Lu Chengfeng. Led by Yu Xian, the men changed into the clean and soft straw sandals prepared by Wu Qi, walked into the thatched cottage, and sat down on the mats that were also woven with fine grass according to their status. Not long after that, a series of footsteps was heard coming from outside the thatched cottage. One after another, old men who had the same age and appearance as Yu Xian arrived. Silently, they changed into the straw sandals, walked into the cottage, and sat down on the mats on both sides of Yu Xian. In the imperial family court of Great Yan Dynasty, there was only one imperial patriarch, and he was Duke Yan Xing, Yu Xian. Apart from them, there were also 48 imperial elders, all of whom were members of imperial clan of Great Yan Dynasty who had the same status as Yuxian. There were also a few of them who came from wealthy clans such as Jing clan, Gao clan, Tian clan, Le clan, and Qin clan. They formed the imperial family court, and basically, they had the final say in all the affairs related to imperial clan of Great Yan Dynasty and all vassal kingdoms. After briefly introducing Lu Qingfeng's identity, Yuxian immediately urged the men to follow the law of Yan Dynasty and go through the procedure of blood inheritance. The Duke of Yan Lianbuji had left behind a rich inheritance, a fortune that could make anyone jealous. As for these things left behind by Yanbuji, if the imperial family court didn't handle it properly, it might bring them a great trouble. Therefore, the imperial family court simply came up with a rule that stated, as long as it was a son of Yanbuji, regardless of his background, the first one who arrived at Ji City would be his successor. All the imperial elders present on the scene were the people who had passed this rule. Therefore, although they were puzzled as to why Yuxian would summon them to the imperial family court in the middle of the night, since it was the son of Yanbuji who came to them, it was inevitable for them to work overtime. If they didn't carry out the blood inheritance on Lu Qingfeng now, what if another illegitimate son of Yanbuji came to them? Wouldn't that bring them another great trouble? No one raised any objection. According to the previously agreed procedure, under the supervision of all the imperial elders, Yuxian and his men opened up a secret door under the imperial family court. From a secret chamber that was filled with countless restrictive spells, they took out a test tube made of transparent white crystal. Inside the test tube, there was half a tube of medicine concocted using the blood and flesh essence of Yanbuji. Under the strict supervision of 48 imperial elders, Yuxian, the Grandmaster of Imperial Clan, and Yan Jiuhui, Yan Bugui, and a few other scouting officers, Lu Qingfeng took out his arm, carefully made a cut on his wrist with a knife, and dripped 3 drops of his blood essence into the test tube. In an instant, the pale red liquid in the test tube turned into a dark green color, and then emitted a blinding golden glow. Yuxian sprung up from his seat abruptly, clapped his hands and said, "It's done. This province, the title of Duke Yanlu and the position of Zhuguijing have been taken by someone." A few other experienced imperial elders also clapped their hands and laughed. "He is the son of Lady Riang. It won't be a problem for him to be taught since he was young. He is also the son of an aristocratic family, and he can inherit the title of Duke Yanlu." These imperial elders had made it very clear that Lu Qingfeng was the son of an aristocratic family. Therefore, they had no objection to him inheriting everything from Yanbuji. If the first illegitimate son of Yanbuji who came to Ji City was born in a commoner family, there might be some unforeseen events. But then again, how could the illegitimate son of Yanbuji and an ordinary girl know the news of Yanbuji's death? The blood had a pale green color and was emitting a strong golden glow. It proved that Lu Qingfeng was indeed the son of Yanbuji. Yan Jiuhui's face fell instantly. He hesitated for a while, then finally came up and bowed at Lu Qingfeng, whose face was filled with wild joy. "I, Yan Jiuhui, the 12th generation of Imperial Clan of Great Yan Dynasty, offer greetings to the Master of Imperial Clan, Duke Yanlu." Yan Jiuhui raised his head up and gave Wu Qi a strange smile. His lips moved, and he said a word without making a sound. "The 18th generation ancestor." Chapter 71. It was said that the Emperor of Great Yan Dynasty, Yan Dan, had 100 sons and 1,000 grandchildren. The 100 sons of Emperor Yan were the clan leaders of 100 imperial clans of Great Yan Dynasty. Although Yanbuji was an unruly man, he was the lineal grandson of Yan Dan's 9th son, and also the lineal great-grandson of Yan Dan. He was the clan leader of the 9th clan of Great Yan Dynasty. Yan Jiuhui's ancestor was the son of a concubine of Yan Dan's 9th son. Therefore, the clan leader of the 9th clan of Great Yan Dynasty, Duke Yanlu, was the one who managed the clan leader. After confirming the identity of Lu Qingfeng, naturally, he would take over the title of Duke Yanlu, and the official position of Zhuguijing and the position of the clan leader of the 9th clan would naturally belong to Lu Qingfeng as well. In terms of seniority, Lu Qingfeng was the real ancestor of Yan Jiuhui and Yan Bugui. Yan Jiuhui was already over 100 years old, and he still didn't have the face to exchange pleasantries with Lu Qingfeng. After Yu Xian confirmed the identity of Lu Qingfeng, he began to handle all kinds of files and official documents for Lu Qingfeng, handing over all kinds of seals and medallions. Then, Yan Jiuhui left with a long face. Yan Bugui was the real grandson of Lu Qingfeng. Yan Jiuhui could run away, but Yan Jiuhui had to stay here and serve him obediently. Not only today, Yan Jiuhui also told Yan Bugui that Lu Qingfeng didn't have any men he could use in Ji City. Therefore, he asked Yan Bugui to bring some men and serve Lu Qingfeng at his beck and call. After a busy night, they finally finished all the handing over procedures. With a shake of his body, Lu Qingfeng had become a member of Great Yan Dynasty's imperial clan, the Duke of Great Yan Dynasty, Duke Yanlu Zhuguijing. Led by Yu Xian with great hospitality, all the hanger-ons brought by Lu Qingfeng moved into Duke Yan Li's mansion, which was left behind by Yan Buji. It was a luxurious mansion that was ranked in the top 30 in Ji City, occupying an area of 1,000 acres. By the time Lu Qingfeng had sorted out the few most pressing issues and gathered all the supervisors in Duke Yan Li's mansion, it was already noon. Last night's storm was like a nightmare, leaving no trace behind. Now that the sun was high in the sky, the hundreds of stewards standing in the courtyard of the Duke's mansion were sweating profusely. Draped in a gauze robe, Lu Qingfeng sat under the eaves, coldly looking at these stewards who wore respectful expressions. When the sun was so hot that the stewards almost fainted, Lu Qingfeng casually said, "Forget it. Just focus on your work in the future. Everything was done according to the old rules. I'm not an unreasonable master. As long as you're diligent and respectful, I won't pick a few unlucky bastards to kill for others to see." Wu Qi leaned against a pillar, looking at these stewards with a smile on his face. It was reasonable for Lu Qingfeng to allow them to suffer under the scorching sun. When a new master came to power, if he didn't give these people a little bit of suffering, there might be more messy things that would happen. By giving them a warning, it would make it easier for Lu Qingfeng to take over the huge inheritance left behind by Yan Buji in the future. Putting aside how much power Zhuguijing had, just the two fiefs under Yan Buji's name, how much was the annual output of them? How many properties in these two fiefs belonged to Lu Qingfeng? How many people were needed to manage all these? Just by looking at the fact that there were over 400 stewards in the Duke's mansion, one could easily imagine how huge the property was. Tai Yuwu, together with a few personal serving ladies and the ferocious-looking Lan Xiazi, came walking towards Wu Qi with a big smile on her face. "Qingfeng, my son, this is your first time in Ji City, so you're not familiar with everything. I don't have any suitable candidates to handle all the affairs in the Duke's mansion. But I do have quite a number of smart and capable men here, who can help you share some of the burden." Tai Yuewu smiled, her eyes narrowed into two lines. Now that Lu Qingfeng had become the Duke of Great Yan, how much benefit could this bring to her mother's family? Wu Qi smiled, staring at Lu Qingfeng, waiting to see how he was going to answer this question. If he allowed those stewards brought by Tai Yuewu to meddle in the affairs of Duke Yan Li's mansion, perhaps after a period of time, Lu Qingfeng would have nothing to do with it. On the contrary, although Lu Qingfeng wasn't familiar with these stewards of Duke Yan Li's mansion, they were, after all, the servants of Yan Buji's family. They were more reliable and trustworthy. Lu Qingfeng stared at Tai Yuewu with a gloomy expression. After a long while, he breathed out a long sigh. "Mother, you don't have to worry about these trivial affairs. Yan Fu, prepare something worth 3 million gold coins for Madam and send her out of the mansion. As for those men brought by Madam, give them some gold and silver coins. No matter what, they have come to Ji City, we can't let them come back empty-handed." Among all the stewards in the courtyard, the white-bearded old man who stood at the front of the group of 4 old men hastily took a step forward and answered with the utmost respect. Tai Yuewu's face immediately turned dark green. She glared at Lu Qingfeng with a venomous look and cried out with a stern voice, "Qingfeng!" Lu Qingfeng looked at Tai Yuewu with an indifferent expression and said with a soft voice, "No matter what, you're my mother. Therefore, I'll ensure the prosperity of Mark Yuanyang's family. If Mark Yuanyang wants to do something, just send someone to contact me at any time." But Lu family has nothing to do with me. Tai Yuewu rolled her eyes. Suddenly, a smile that was as beautiful as a spring flower emerged on her dark face. You little boy, why are you scaring your mother like this? Nothing to do with Lu family? Now I understand. Why don't I divorce Lu Wenrua when I return home? Tai Yuewu had a bright smile on her face, but she was discreetly observing Lu Chengfeng's expression with extreme caution. After a brief moment of silence, Lu Chengfeng said with an indifferent tone, I'll let mother handle this personally. How can I interfere in mother's matter? Tai Yuewu remained silent for a while, then she asked carefully, So, mother, you'll leave Lu family when you return home? Mother, you'll come visit Chengfeng more often in the future? Lu Chengfeng nodded his head slowly, smiled and said, After all, mother is my birth mother. If I'm free, of course I'll visit you more often. But, if it's not necessary, those people from Lu family of Liang should not show themselves in front of me. He paused for a brief moment, then Lu Chengfeng continued in a carefree manner, It's not a bad thing if grandfather and a few uncles want to come to Ji City. The smile on Tai Yuewu's face grew thicker, and she answered with a clear voice. After pondering for a while, Lu Chengfeng waved his hand and asked all the stewards to leave the courtyard. After all the stewards had left, Lu Chengfeng said with a serious tone, Once I've gained a firm foothold in Ji City, I'll ask a few uncles to send some men to Ji City. Tai family thrives on the army, so I'll try to get a batch of armors and weapons specially made in Ji City and send them back. Tai Yuewu smiled so widely that her eyes narrowed into two fine lines. She sat next to Lu Chengfeng in a warm and affectionate manner, stroking Lu Chengfeng's head. In all his life, ever since Lu Chengfeng was born, Tai Yuewu had never treated him so intimately. Although Lu Chengfeng had grown into an adult, his eyes still turned slightly red when he saw Tai Yuewu's action. On the other side, Wu Qi twitched his mouth. If Lu Chengfeng's words were to spread out, perhaps the monarch of Lu Kingdom would be the first one to come to Ji City and argue with him. Tai family controlled nearly half of the military strength of Lu Kingdom, and yet, Lu Chengfeng still wanted to send the armors and weapons specially made by Great Yan Dynasty to Tai family. What was the meaning of this? Obviously, Lu Chengfeng was telling Tai Yuewu that if his grandfather and a few uncles wanted to rebel, they could just slaughter the entire family of the monarch of Lu Kingdom. After all, there was still a huge grudge between Lu Chengfeng, Princess Yingchuan, and Lord Puyang. It was better to settle this score as soon as possible. Breathing out a long sigh, Lu Chengfeng gave his last order, Mother, I think you better go back quickly. Break off the relationship with Lu family as soon as possible. As for mother's reward, I'll ask Duke Yuxian to announce it to everyone after you settle the matter there. Just like what was mentioned before, after Lu Chengfeng inherited the title of Duke Yenlu as his birth mother, Tai Yuewu would also receive a new title, becoming one of the most influential ladies in Great Yan Dynasty. But without a doubt, when Tai Yuewu was still the matriarch of Lu family, Lu Chengfeng would never allow her to receive a new title, the rights and benefits that came with it. Wu Qi found it funny. Although Lu Wenrua had diligently sent the mountain-shattering cavalry to escort Lu Chengfeng all the way, Lu Chengfeng did not appreciate his kindness at all. When Tai Yuewu insisted on cutting off all relations with Lu family of Liang was destined to decline. In those years, Lu family had pushed Lu Chengfeng too far, and now, it was no wonder that Lu Chengfeng had to repay them in such a way. After chatting with Tai Yuewu for a long time, Tai Yuewu finally left the Duke mansion contentedly. Lu Chengfeng would use all his strength to retaliate against Lu family of Liang, but he would never be able to cut off all relations with his mother and his mother's clan. On the contrary, he had to use all his strength to cultivate the power of his mother's clan. If not, he would be a rootless tree in Ji City, and without any help, how could he have a stable foothold? After sending off Tai Yuewu, Lu Chengfeng turned to look at Wu Qi helplessly. You've heard what mother said just now. I don't have anyone in my hands now. Although those stewards are the servants of Duke Yenlu, I still need someone to keep an eye on them. Wu Qi, tell me, what should I do? Looking at Wu Qi, Lu Chengfeng's eyes were filled with fatigue and helplessness. He only had a few hanger-ons around him, and those hanger-ons who came from Little Meng City were experts in murder and arson. If he asked them to help him manage the government affairs and finances, in less than 3 months, Lu Chengfeng would be completely ruined. Wu Qi stared at Lu Chengfeng, raised up a finger and said, "Young master has promised me, I do want to join an immortal sect." Lu Chengfeng stared at Wu Qi and said in a deep voice, "Help me with all your strength for half a year, let me have a stable foothold in Ji City, then I'll recommend you to join an immortal sect in Great Yen." After listening to what he said, Lu Chengfeng quickly said, "Even if you join an immortal sect, you will still be the chief hanger-on of the Duke Mansion. You can't just throw your hands away like this." Regarding Wu Qi's ability, Lu Chengfeng had always been relying on him. He was really afraid that Wu Qi would just devote himself to cultivating immortality and ignore him, his old master. After getting the promise from Lu Chengfeng, Wu Qi also promised that he would always give him advice and wouldn't devote himself to cultivating immortality. Both of them had a frank discussion about this problem, and at last, Wu Qi gave Lu Chengfeng a suggestion. Lu Chengfeng's foundation was too shallow, and he didn't have anyone he could trust and use. However, he still had many good friends in the Lu Kingdom. These good friends of Lu Chengfeng had given Lu Chengfeng a great help when he was plotting against Yen. They were the sons of concubines or illegitimate sons from some influential clans in the Lu Kingdom. Although they had received the education that the sons of influential clans should have, and possessed a certain level of ability, their status in their clans was as awkward as Lu Chengfeng's. These men were the best helpers for Lu Chengfeng at the moment. Summon them to Ji City, and ask them to help young master with all kinds of affairs. They do have the ability to do so. Young master, promise them that after 3 to 5 years, when young master has trained some capable men, you'll help them seize the power of their clans. With a faint smile on his face, Wu Qi gave Lu Chengfeng his final suggestion. With this, young master will be able to solve your urgent problem. Those young masters will also have some connections in Ji City, and after they have gone through all kinds of training, they will be of great use. When they return to the Lu Kingdom, young master will help them seize the power of their clans. With that, young master will have a strong support in all the vassal kingdoms. Upon hearing Wu Qi's suggestion, Lu Chengfeng couldn't help but let out a wild cheer and nearly jumped up from his seat. Chapter 72. After sending off Tai Yuowu, who was burning with impatience and wanted to return to the Lu Kingdom, Wu Qi and his company had just returned from the outskirts of Ji City. They immediately saw a large group of scouting officers' men gathering outside Duke Yen Li's mansion, moving a large pile of clothes, quilts, and other miscellaneous items from a few coaches. The chief steward of the Duke's mansion, Yen Fu, stood blankly in front of the door, watching these men of scouting office moving things in and out. He didn't show any intention of stopping them. Not only Yen Fu, all the other servants of the Duke's mansion were staying far away from them, not daring to come close to these men of scouting office. Lu Chengfeng knitted his brows into a tight frown. He walked out from the coach and asked with a loud voice, "Yen Fu, what is going on here?" Before Yen Fu arrived, Yen Bugui had already come out from nowhere. He bowed respectfully at Lu Chengfeng and said, "Clan leader, it's my grandfather who asked me to stay by your side temporarily and listen to your orders. That's why I've brought 300 of my subordinates to stay here temporarily." Wu Qi was taken aback. Yen Bugui staying by Lu Chengfeng's side temporarily and listen to his orders? This was what Yen Jiuhui had told him 2 nights ago. But judging from the current situation, there was something wrong with the situation. Why did he need to bring 300 men here to move? He turned his head and looked at those servants standing before the entrance of the Duke's mansion. Suddenly, Wu Qi realized what was wrong since yesterday. "Lord Yen, do you know why there are only these stewards and servants in our young master's mansion? Where are those guards?" Lu Chengfeng was suddenly enlightened. Duke Yen Li's mansion was the mansion of a duke. With Yen Buji's title and official position, it was not a big deal for him to keep a few thousand hanger-ons and have over 10,000 personal guards in his mansion. But now, in this Duke Yen Li's mansion, besides all the stewards and servants, not a single hanger-on and personal guard of Yen Buji was seen. This was just too ridiculous. Although the monkeys would scatter when the tree falls, Duke Yen Li's mansion had yet to fall, and there was still Lu Chengfeng, the heir to the Duke's mansion. Even if those hanger-ons had gone to other places, those personal guards, especially the personal guards raised by Duke Yen Li's mansion for generations, should still stay in the mansion. Yen Fu! Lu Chengfeng roared at the steward, who was trying to approach them but dared not. Yen Bugui turned around and looked at Yen Fu. He lowered his voice and sighed, "Sovereign, please don't blame Yen Fu. These stewards and housekeepers are the servants of the Duke's mansion. To put it bluntly, Duke Buji's so-called drowning in the river is just a rumor to the public. In fact, Duke Buji was thrown into the river by someone, and his heart was pierced by a sharp sword. Even his soul was destroyed by someone using a magical item." Lu Qingfeng's expression changed instantly, and Wu Qi instinctively felt his hair standing up. It seemed like he had once again been dragged into a huge trouble. All of a sudden, Yen Qi Qi Yen Buji. To Yen. Obviously, Yen Buji was assassinated, and all kinds of clues showed that someone in Duke Yen Li's mansion was colluding with the assassin. This incident had even alerted Emperor Yen Dan, who had been in secluded cultivation all year round. He had personally issued an imperial decree ordering scouting office and other special agents of Great Yen Dynasty to investigate this incident. Therefore, all the hanger-ons and personal guards of Duke Yen Li's mansion had been thrown into prison for investigation. As a result, the spacious Duke's mansion did not have any defensive force. Because of this, Yen Jiahui found a random excuse to let Yen Bugui stay by Lu Qingfeng's side and listen to his commands. Firstly, he asked Yen Bugui to use the force of scouting office to protect Lu Qingfeng, and secondly, he asked Lu Qingfeng to be the bait. It is not uncommon for members of Great Yen Imperial Clan to be killed in an accident, and there are at least dozens of cases every year. After all, the total number of members of Great Yen Imperial Clan is over 1 million, and any accident could happen. But, for a direct descendant of His Majesty to be assassinated, and it was someone who was close to Duke Buji, and a Duke of Great Yen Dynasty, this is something that has never happened before. Yen Bugui stared at Lu Qingfeng, who had his face turned dark with rage. With a bitter smile on his face, he said, "Therefore, we have to get to the bottom of this case." Lu Qingfeng had a gloomy face and didn't say anything. No matter who it was, when anyone knew that they had stepped into a huge whirlpool, they would not be in a good mood. On the other side, Wu Qi breathed out a long sigh helplessly. He crooked his finger at Zhao Chenzue, calling him over and said, "In the future, no matter where young master goes, I want everyone to stand guard. Get all the men of Meng village to wear heavy armors and protect young master day and night." Zhao Chenzue's face turned solemn. He answered hastily, then hastily entered the mansion and summoned Meng Xiaobai and the others. Now that Lu Qingfeng was a duke of Great Yen Dynasty, all the glory and wealth of the people were placed on Lu Qingfeng's shoulders. Therefore, Zhao Chenzue had no choice but to be extra careful. Luo Kadi and Mao Yang came over hastily as well. Without saying anything, they stood on both sides of Lu Qingfeng. Their eyes were gleaming brightly as they glanced around vigilantly. Yen Bugui shook his head and said, "During the day, no one dares to stir up any trouble in Ji City. During the night, as long as sect leader deploys the formation, and with the scouting office keeping a close watch on this place, nothing will go wrong. For the time being, sect leader, just don't leave Ji City too often." Lu Qingfeng knitted his brows and pondered for a while, but in the end he nodded his head helplessly. In Ji City, there were only a few people he was familiar with, and he had yet to get in touch with those influential nobles of Great Yen Dynasty. Everything had just begun. The current Lu Qingfeng could only passively accept these storms, and he had no power to fight back. Wu Qi turned his head and gave the surroundings a glance. Suddenly, he recalled those city guards who had expanded Little Meng City. He pondered for a brief moment, then waved his hand at Zhang Hu and Hu Wei, giving them some orders. Sending soldiers from Little Meng City to Ji City was a helpless choice. At least, the soldiers from Little Meng City wouldn't have any conflict with the soldiers from Ji City. After busying himself for a while, Yen Fu had arranged a place for the men of scouting office that was close to the small building where Lu Qingfeng lived. Before he could sit down and catch his breath, Yen Fu came running into the room with a trembling body. Carefully, he handed over a visiting card, which was made from golden threads and embroidered with faint bamboo leaf patterns using silver threads, and emanating an air of wealth and honor, to Lu Chengfeng. Master, Prince Ci, Yen Hua has come to pay a visit. Yen Fu's face was filled with shock. Yen Bugui, who was sitting aside and drinking tea, sprung up immediately and cried out, "What? Prince Ci has come to pay a visit? Sect leader, I have to see him." Prince Ci, Yen Hua, was one of the 8 princes who governed the state affairs of Great Yen Dynasty. The emperor of Great Yen Dynasty, Yen Dan, was in a secluded cultivation all year round. Chief General Jing Ku and all the other important ministers of Great Yen Dynasty didn't show themselves easily. They were all in a secluded cultivation, trying their best to make a breakthrough in their current realm, seeking for a stronger power and a longer life. The first generation of their descendants, the generation of Yen Dan's sons and daughters, had also been living in seclusion. They were either cultivating or doing other things, and none of them were involved in the state affairs. Yen Dan's grandsons, the generation of Yu Xian, only had 3 to 5 of them who were passionate about seeking power and enjoying life. They were in charge of the imperial family court, a noble and prestigious department. Although they held a high position, they didn't have much power and were only used as a supervisor. The ones who were really in charge of the real power of Great Yen Dynasty were the 8 great-grandsons of Yen Dan. They were given the title of prince and were known as the 8 princes of Great Yen Dynasty. Prince Ren, Prince Yi, Prince Li, Prince Xian, Prince Zhong, Prince Xiao, Prince Min, and Prince Ci, these 8 princes formed the real core of Great Yen Dynasty's imperial court. Prince Ci, Yen Hua, was the youngest among them. Although he was Yen Dan's great-grandson, he was only in his 50s, still in the prime of his life. Yen Buji and Yen Hua were cousins. When Lu Chengfeng saw Yen Hua, he had to obediently call him uncle. In terms of the title of nobility, the title of the 8 princes was even higher than Yu Xian, who controlled the imperial family court. Even though Lu Chengfeng had inherited the title of Duke Yen Lu and the official position of Zhuguozheng, when facing Prince Ci, no matter it was his seniority, title, or actual power, he had no choice but to bow his head and obey his orders. "Please, please come in." Lu Chengfeng rose to his feet, brought his men and walked out of the main entrance. The main entrance of Duke Yen Li's mansion was opened. Wu Qi followed behind Lu Chengfeng and strode into the main entrance. He immediately saw a group of elite armored soldiers standing in front of the entrance, escorting a strange beast. It had a pale yellow body, looked like a horse, but had scales all over its body, a pair of spiral-shaped horns growing out of its head, and a pair of golden gleams shooting out from its eyes. This was a rare beast, the 1,000 miles golden eyes cloud. Once it lost its temper, it could run 30,000 miles in one day and one night, and it could run at an incredible speed in a short distance. It was one of the best mounts under the heaven. The pair of horns on its head were extremely hard and sharp, comparable to a precious blade that could slice through iron like mud. Riding on the back of the golden eyes cloud, Yen Hua looked like a man in his 30s. His face was fair and beardless, and his cheeks were slightly longer. He was emanating a faint air of dignity that could make one feel suffocated. When he opened his eyes and looked at someone, his gaze was sharp, as if he could see through their internal organs. Judging from the faintly discernible aura emanating from him, he was an expert of Xiantian realm, at least in the breath condensation tier of Xiantian realm. Upon seeing Yen Hua, Lu Chengfeng hastily bowed and said, "I didn't know Prince Ci was coming. Please forgive me for not going out to meet you." Yen Hua leaped off the mount, supported Lu Chengfeng with one hand and said, "You don't have to be so courteous. I have a very close relationship with Buji. I heard that you've inherited his title of nobility and official position, that's why I came here to have a look." Yen Hua helped Lu Chengfeng up, gave Lu Chengfeng a glance, nodded his head and praised, "You look like a talented man. Good, you're a descendant of Yen clan. Your cultivation base is stronger than your father. If he had the cultivation base you have today, he wouldn't have passed away so suddenly." As a son, Lu Chengfeng found it inappropriate to answer Yen Hua's words. Instead, he put on a sad expression and respectfully invited Yen Hua into Duke Yen Li's mansion. The few hundred armored guards brought by Yen Hua followed him into the mansion, surrounding the front and back of the main hall. Upon seeing this scene, Wu Qi couldn't help but twitch his lips. Was this Yen Hua afraid of death or something? His armored guards had entered the main hall just like that, not giving any face to Lu Qingfeng at all. He was a senior, one of the 8 princes who governed the imperial court. How could he not give face to his master? Shaking his head, Wu Qi followed them into the main hall. Yen Bugui was bowing to Yen Hua. Yen Hua gave Yen Bugui a sideways glance, snorted lightly and signaled him to stand up. Yen Bugui was just the son of a concubine, and his seniority was far lower than Yen Hua's. By snorting lightly, Yen Hua had already given Yen Bugui a great face. Yen Bugui rose to his feet obediently and stood aside, narrowing his eyes and staring at those armored guards standing outside the main hall. Yen Hua and Lu Qingfeng sat down as the guest and the host. When the serving maids served them tea, Yen Hua began to talk. "Qingfeng, congratulations on inheriting the title of nobility from my brother Buji. The reason I came here today is to discuss something with you." Not allowing Lu Qingfeng to open his mouth, Yen Hua continued in an indifferent tone. "In your fief, there are 7 iron mountains and 5 iron smelting workshops. I'll use 5 fish farms, 3 pearl farms, and 4 jade mines in the East Sea in exchange for these iron mountains and iron smelting workshops. You can handle the handover documents tomorrow. Using natural fish farms, pearl farms, and 4 jade mines that produce luxury goods in exchange for 7 iron mountains and 5 iron smelting workshops?" Before Lu Qingfeng could say anything, Wu Qi had already interrupted with a smile. "May I ask, Prince Ci, why are you doing this?" Yen Hua raised his head and glared at Wu Qi, sneered and said, "Who are you? How dare you interrupt? Someone, drag him out and give him 300 strokes of the rod." Immediately, a group of armored guards rushed in like wolves and tigers. Chapter 73. These armored soldiers brought by Yen Hua were all elites selected from among thousands. Among the dozens of men who leaped toward Wu Qi, each of them had a cultivation base of peak stage Hotian realm. 2 of them even had energy ripples emanating from their bodies. Obviously, they were just one step away from breaking through the realm of Xiantian. It seemed they were experts in some kind of combo combat technique. A dozen of them leaped toward Wu Qi from all directions, grabbing his neck, shoulders, elbows, wrists, ribs, knees, and all the major vital points of his body were under the clutches of their huge hands. Wu Qi was caught unprepared. The fact that Yen Hua openly captured someone in Lu Qingfeng's mansion was beyond everyone's expectation. To put it simply, he didn't take Wu Qi seriously. To put it simply, he was disregarding Lu Qingfeng's identity. To put it simply, he was provoking all the members of the 9th clan of Great Yen Imperial Clan with the surname Yen. No one expected that Yen Hua would give such an order. Therefore, Wu Qi was pinned down by these armored soldiers. Dozens of burly men shouted at the same time, exerting force with their arms, trying to push Wu Qi to the ground. Behind him, 4 armored soldiers were seen running towards him, each carrying a black stick as thick as a small bowl. Once Wu Qi was pinned to the ground, they would immediately give him a good lesson. Although these 4 black sticks looked ordinary, they were actually made from 10,000 years old mountain vines. The vines were picked from the depth of the mountain, chopped down, soaked in tung oil for 3 years, then exposed to the sun, soaked again, and exposed to the sun again. After a total of 18 years, the original bucket-thick vine was shrunk to the size of a small bowl. Only then could the stick be considered a success. Although it was made from mountain vines, its weight was comparable to steel. When the stick smashed down, it carried a soft yet strong force, and could even smash a large rock into pieces. For ordinary people, they couldn't even withstand 3 strikes, let alone 300. Obviously, Yen Hua wanted to beat Wu Qi to death by giving him 300 strikes. Wu Qi was also at a disadvantage. He didn't expect that Yen Hua wouldn't put Lu Qingfeng, his master, in his eyes. Dozens of peak Hotian armored soldiers exerted their strength together. Wu Qi staggered under the pressure, and his body fell to the ground uncontrollably. As soon as he fell to the ground, other than the 4 soldiers who had grabbed onto his shoulders and ribs, the other soldiers had let go of him. The 4 armored soldiers behind him raised their heavy black lacquered clubs, exhaled, and then smashed them down on Wu Qi's buttocks and legs. The 4 of them used all their strength. The black lacquered staff pierced through the air, emitting a muffled whistling sound as it landed heavily on Wu Qi's buttocks. The huge impact caused Wu Qi's body to tremble, and the huge force passed through his body and directly hit the ground. The 4 dark cyan old mountain stone tiles under Wu Qi's body were crushed on the spot. Wu Qi felt a sharp pain piercing into his heart. The clothes on his buttocks were smashed to pieces, and a thick bloody mark suddenly appeared on his flesh. Although he had raised his internal energy to protect his body in time, this strike had nearly shattered all the internal energy in his body. The first armored soldier who swung the black lacquered staff took 2 steps back, while the other 3 followed a steady rhythm, swinging their clubs one after another. These 4 armored soldiers were experts in beating people's buttocks. Once they started, the black lacquered staff would fall down like a windmill, without any delay. Hearing another wind-breaking sound, Wu Qi was greatly alarmed. The strike just now had nearly shattered his defensive energy, and his skin and flesh had suffered a serious injury. If he were hit a few more times, he would lose his life right here and now. Throwing his head back and letting out a shrill cry, Wu Qi's eyes suddenly turned red. The enormous innate water energy hidden in the water meridians in both of his arms was activated, rushing straight into his 8 special meridians and 12 standard meridians like the water of the Yellow River breaking through a dam. A visible cloud of misty water vapor sprayed out from Wu Qi's body. The 4 armored soldiers who were holding his body let out a muffled snort, as if their index fingers were hit by a bomb at close range. An irresistible force came through their fingers, causing their flesh and blood to fly in all directions, and their pale white bones to break one after another. Letting out a furious roar, Wu Qi's short hair stood up one by one. He gathered the power of the jade-breaking palm with his left hand, and secretly cast the star-picking palm with his right hand. His body twisted and leaped up like a crazy poisonous python. Along with a muffled sound of water waves, Wu Qi thrust out his left hand, hitting one of the 4 armored soldiers who were holding him in the chest. The extremely condensed and soft palm force smashed into their bodies, exploding in the deepest part of their bodies. Only those who had witnessed the current situation of these 4 armored soldiers knew what it meant by flesh and blood flying in all directions. Only those who witnessed the current situation of these 4 armored soldiers knew what it meant by flesh and blood flying in all directions. In just a blink of an eye, their bodies exploded and shattered into pieces. Countless amounts of blood and meat paste squeezed out from the gaps between their armors, shooting out over 100 feet away along with ear-piercing hissing noises. The hall where Lu Chengfeng was entertaining guests had suddenly turned into a sheet of blood red. Before the 3 wooden poles could fall down, Wu Qi spun around like a whirlwind, slapping heavily on the chests of the 4 armored soldiers with the jade-breaking palm, while silently striking out his right hand with the star-picking palm, lightly pressing on the vital parts of their dantian. The blood and qi essence of these 4 armored soldiers rushed into Wu Qi's body. His buttocks, which were swollen and bruised after being hit by a wooden pole just now, were replenished by this blood and qi essence, healing the wounds at an incredible speed. The blood and qi in Wu Qi's body surged and surged, filling his entire body with strength. He let out a long and sonorous cry, glaring at Yen Helua with a pair of blood-red eyes. "Since you want to kill me, I'll kill you!" Wu Qi cried out fiercely, raising both palms and slashing down towards Yen Helua's head. Bang, bang, bang. 4 muffled booms rang out. The bodies of the 4 armored soldiers holding the black wooden poles trembled, as the frightening jade-breaking force exploded in their bodies. Just like the previous 4 armored soldiers, their bodies exploded into countless pieces of flesh and blood, spraying out from the gaps between their armors. A rain of blood poured down from the hall, drenching everyone in the hall. The sky was filled with blood and flesh. With his eyes bloodshot, Wu Qi looked like a devil that had just come from the hell of blood, screaming and leaping towards Yen Helua. Poor Yen Helua. As one of the 8 princes of Great Yen Dynasty, He was extremely wealthy and honorable. As a man who had lived a comfortable life, he had never seen a brutal man like Wu Qi, who had fought his way through mountains of corpses and seas of blood. Although he had the cultivation of breath condensation tier of Xiantian realm, at this moment, Yen Hulua was like a delicate teenage girl who was facing 70 to 80 lectures alone. His body was shivering, and he kept retreating backward crazily. While fleeing in a panic, he cried out with a stern voice, "Somebody! Somebody! Kill this maniac! Kill him now!" The few armored soldiers who had captured Wu Qi just now were standing right in the hall, and they were the closest to Wu Qi. Witnessing how Wu Qi had used an unimaginable method to kill 8 of their companions, and even dashed towards their master, Prince Ci, Yen Hulua, the few armored soldiers were scared out of their wits. Almost instinctively, they huddled together and dashed towards Wu Qi. As they were scared out of their wits, they didn't use any techniques or strategies, and just slammed into Wu Qi with brute force. They didn't seek to kill Wu Qi, they just wanted to stall Wu Qi for a short moment, so that Yen Hulua could have the chance to escape, and so that the real experts around Yen Hulua could come to his rescue. They stretched out their arms, circulating their innate energies in their bodies over and over again, exerting their strongest force and leaping towards Wu Qi while howling. Right after Wu Qi sprung up 10 feet into the air, and when he was less than 20 feet away, these desperate armored soldiers suddenly dashed towards him, huddled together and wrapped their arms around Wu Qi. "Go to hell!" The red gleam in Wu Qi's eyes grew stronger, and a strong blood-red gleam almost burst out from his eye sockets. He took out the innate water serpent pill and placed it in his mouth. An enormous amount of water elemental energies kept rushing into his body from the pill, replenishing his innate energies that had been greatly depleted. The biggest feature of Scroll of Stealing was that it allowed one to consume innate energies without any scruples, and replenish innate energies at the same time, without any scruples. This was exactly in line with the characteristics of robbers and thieves. Since they had stolen something, naturally, they would be extravagant and wasteful. Which robber or thief would be so frugal? How could they have the intention of spending money for every grain of rice? Except for Scroll of Stealing, which was a heaven-defying cultivation technique. If any other cultivator dared to do this, their body would have long exploded from the enormous amount of energy contained in the innate water serpent pill. This was the limitation of the cultivation technique. Except for Wu Qi, no one in this world dared to do this. At this moment, Wu Qi's body had turned into a bridge. The enormous amount of energy from the innate water serpent pill kept bursting out from his body, giving him nearly all the power of the 3,800 years old innate water serpent in an instant. Waves of water that could be seen with naked eyes emerged around Wu Qi, slapping onto the few armored soldiers with a loud boom. Right when these armored soldiers hugged Wu Qi, the water waves, which were pure and without any impurities, rushed into their bodies. Their bodies were instantly shattered, as every single cell in their body was exploded by the swelling body fluid. The water waves that were coiling around Wu Qi's body suddenly turned blood red. All the blood and Qi essence in the bodies of these 8 armored soldiers were sucked out by him. If it were Wu Qi, he could only steal 1% of the blood and Qi essence in these armored soldiers. However, with the help of the innate water serpent pill, the great hand of Web and Little Star Picking Palm, and the frightening cultivation of the innate water serpent, he could easily suck out all the blood and Qi essence in these armored soldiers, including all their Picotian innate energies. Blood waves were rolling and rolling around him. With a stern voice, Wu Qi cried out, "Yen Hulua, die!" Pointing his left hand at Yen Hulua from a distance, Wu Qi suddenly shot out countless blood-red threads from his palm. An ear-piercing whistling noise rang out, as the blood waves around Wu Qi were rocking and rolling, transforming into a huge blood-red whirlpool. The surrounding air was driven by this blood-red whirlpool, turning into tens of tornadoes, each as thick as the mouth of a bowl. Yen Hulua's fleeing body came to a halt abruptly, as the invisible force of the great hand of Web had already enveloped him. He could not control his body and was being dragged toward Wu Qi. What scared Yen Hulua even more was that the energy and Qi essence in his body were about to fly away, as if they were about to rush out from his pores and join the blood waves around Wu Qi. Seeing that Yan Hua was about to be killed by Wu Qi, two vague figures suddenly teleported in front of Yan Hua. "How dare you be so rude to Princess Dino?" Two vague figures shouted out at the same time. They waved their hands and unleashed two 7 to 8 feet long sword beams, thrusting whistling towards Wu Qi along with a cold breeze. One of the two sword beams was yellow, while the other was gray. The quality of these two sword beams was not very high. Obviously, they were just ordinary flying swords. However, the cultivation of these two men was not weak at all. They had the cultivation of embryonic breath tier of Xiantian realm. Compared to Old Devil and Lord Flame, who relied on evil techniques to increase their cultivation level, these two were embryonic breath level Xiantian realm cultivators who had trained themselves to reach their current level. When their sword beams were unleashed, the blood-red whirlpool unleashed from Wu Qi's palm was immediately shattered into pieces. Laughing hideously, Wu Qi narrowed his eyes and cried out harshly, "Let's see who's going to die." Raising his left arm, Wu Qi gathered all his innate water energy on it, and took the initiative to thrust his left arm towards the two sword beams. The sword beams streaked across, and in an instant, blood sprayed out from Wu Qi's left arm. Chapter 74. The shrill sword cry shook everyone's ears and brought them a sharp pain. The dark green glazed tiles on the roof were pierced by the shrill sword cry, breaking into hundreds of pieces on the spot. On Wu Qi's left arm that was raised high up in the air, two short swords, each about 4 inches long, were deeply embedded in his flesh. They were twisting and struggling, but no matter how hard they tried, they just could not break free from the restraint of Wu Qi's body. Although he only had the cultivation of Meridian Cultivating Tier, the scroll of stealing that Wu Qi was cultivating was too powerful. Stealing the blood and qi essence of others to strengthen his own body, stealing the cultivation base of others to improve his own cultivation base, stealing the soul fragments of others to strengthen his own soul. Everything was so unimaginably queer. Therefore, although his cultivation base was at the Meridian Cultivating Tier, his overall strength could not be measured in this way. After being nourished by the blood and qi essence of so many people, his body was now a few times stronger than an ordinary Meridian Cultivating Tier warrior. The toughness of his muscles and bones was almost comparable to a Physique Cultivating Tier warrior. The density of his innate energy was not any weaker than a Breath Condensing Tier warrior. With such a strong body and powerful innate energy gathered together, Wu Qi injected all his innate water energy into his left arm. Immediately, his left arm looked like it was forged from diamond. Although the flying swords of the two embryonic breath tier cultivators were very sharp, when they were clamped by Wu Qi's flesh, they could only let out shrill cries, and could not break free from the restraint of Wu Qi's arm no matter how hard they struggled. The two embryonic breath tier cultivators stared blankly at the two flying swords embedded in Wu Qi's arm, completely dumbfounded. Although their flying swords were not of a high grade, they were still sharp weapons of mid-grade magical item. Wherever the sword beam passed through, even an ordinary iron armor would be sliced in half. How could a man with flesh and blood restrain flying swords? This was a sensational story. Could it be that he was a human immortal who had attained mastery in Jindan? Both cultivators looked at each other in shock. Chi-Chi breathed out a mouthful of innate energy, performed a sword incantation gesture and cried out, "Go!" The two flying swords vibrated violently together, constantly emitting sharp sword cries. Blood burst out from the wound on Wu Qi's arm, which was pierced by the flying swords, and dripped onto the ground, which was now badly mutilated. With a hideous smile on his face, Wu Qi leaped towards the two cultivators. The innate water energy was spinning rapidly in the meridians of his left arm, producing deep and muffled sounds of water ripples. Two invisible whirlpools formed on his left arm, and at the core of the whirlpools were two flying swords embedded in his arms. A huge suction force firmly trapped the two flying swords. No matter how fast they struggled, they could not escape from Wu Qi's grasp. Not only that, as the saying goes, dripping water can wear away a stone, Wu Qi's innate water energy kept eroding and wearing away at the flying sword, wiping away the spiritual mark left behind by the two cultivators and the thread of innate energy that controlled the flying sword. The strength of Wu Qi's soul was far stronger than the two embryonic breath-level cultivators. Although it was 1 against 2, it still made the two cultivators feel more and more uncomfortable in controlling the flying swords. Obviously, these two cultivators were orthodox Qi practitioners. They had put all their energy into polishing their innate energy, refining their flying swords, and practicing magic and talismans. Orthodox Qi practitioners like them only focused on cultivation. Although they had a solid foundation and a superb cultivation base, they lacked the ability to adapt to situations. Seeing that the flying swords had no effect, the two cultivators breathed out mouthfuls of innate energy and kept urging the flying swords to detach from Wu Qi's body, so that the sword beam could cut off Wu Qi's head. They had forgotten that the distance between them and Wu Qi was only a few feet. Even a warrior at the peak of the Hotian realm could cross this distance in just 1 step. With a hideous grin on his face, Wu Qi extracted a large amount of natural energy from the innate water serpent pill, instantly turning it into rolling natural energy and spreading it into his meridians. The blood and Qi essence of the 7 or 8 armored warriors were absorbed into his body, condensing into 2 explosive balls of jade-shattering palm energy on his right palm and right knee. Like a tiger, he pounced in front of the 2 cultivators and pressed his palm on the chest of the man on the left. Then he lifted his right knee and thrust it into the lower part of the cultivator's kidney with all his strength. The natural energy extracted from the innate water serpent pill and the blood and Qi essence of the 7 or 8 armored warriors were divided into 2 equal parts. After that, Qi blasted them into the bodies of the 2 cultivators. Suddenly, the bodies of the 2 cultivators swelled up. After entering the embryonic breath level, all the spirit, Qi, and spirit of a cultivator would be contained inside his body. His appearance would be as old as it could be, and as shriveled and ugly as it could be. However, after being forcefully blasted by the natural energy and blood and Qi essence of Wu Qi, the shriveled skin of the 2 cultivators suddenly turned white and shiny, swelling up like a silkworm that had eaten too much. Damn it! 2 miserable howls rang out. Countless finger-sized cracks appeared on the surface of the bodies of the 2 embryonic breath-level cultivators of Xiantian realm. The jade-shattering energy kept exploding inside their bodies, and all the people inside and outside the hall could hear the deep, muffled explosions coming out from their bodies. Streams of blood kept bursting out from their 7 apertures, and their breaths were weakening at an incredible rate. Die! Wu Qi's eyes went wide as he gave a loud roar at both men. The storage bag moved, and 2 poisonous prickles from Meng Mountains were grabbed in Wu Qi's hand, then he ruthlessly stabbed them between the eyebrows of the 2 cultivators. Another huge wave of energy from the innate water serpent pill penetrated into the brains of the 2 cultivators through the prickles, shattering their spiritual ocean and soul into countless pieces under the impact of the energy. The great hand of web was unleashed through the poisonous prickles, and a tremendous suction force was sent out from the prickles. Both cultivators had spent over 100 years of arduous cultivation to reach the embryonic breath level of Xiantian realm, and their powerful and condensed souls were comparable to the combination of 100 souls of ordinary people. When such a huge soul was shattered into pieces, it was extracted by the mystic technique of scroll of stealing, turning into pure soul particles and injecting into Wu Qi's spiritual ocean. In Wu Qi's spiritual ocean, the water ripples of 1,000 miles in circumference began to spin crazily. The soul particles were washed over and over again by the water ripples, and the traces of aura from the 2 cultivators were completely washed away. The pure soul energy transformed into a 7-colored ray and squeezed out from the water ripples, turning into a sheet of 7-colored mist that hovered slowly in Wu Qi's spiritual ocean. At the moment, Wu Qi did not have the ability to digest and absorb the 2 enormous soul energies. He could only temporarily store them in his spiritual ocean and slowly absorb and fuse them in the future. The soul was the most important foundation for a cultivator. The stronger the soul was, the stronger the divine will and divine sense would be, and it would not be easy for the cultivator to be invaded by the external evils during the cultivation, and it would not be easy for the cultivator to make mistakes during the cultivation. As long as he could absorb all the soul energies from these two cultivators, it would be much easier for Wu Qi to break through to the Jindan realm in the future. Although it seemed like a long time ago, in fact, everything happened in just a few seconds. Two cultivators of embryonic breath level of Xiantian realm were brutally killed. A huge amount of dark blood burst out from their bodies, and in just a blink of an eye, they had turned into two pitch-black meatballs the size of a child. After that, the jade breaking force exploded, and the two pitch-black meatballs exploded. Countless poisonous blood and flesh splattered in all directions, scaring all the people in and out of the hall into a flurry. Laughing hideously, Wu Qi pulled out the two middle-grade magical flying swords from his left arm and shoved them into the storage bag. The innate water energy was flowing back and forth in his arm, constantly nourishing the wounds and healing the blood vessels and nerves quickly. However, not only did these two flying swords injure Wu Qi's muscles and nerves, they had also pierced through the bones of his left arm, damaging the bone marrow inside. This was a very serious injury to Wu Qi's foundation of cultivation. If it were any other cultivator who had their bone marrow damaged, they would have to consume all kinds of spirit medicines and spend a few months to carefully nurse their body back to health. But for Wu Qi, although the injury was serious, as long as he could steal the blood and qi essence of a few people to fill his body, he would be able to recover in 3 to 5 days. There was still a little bit of blood and qi essence left in his body. Without hesitation, Wu Qi gathered them near the wounds. Wave after wave of scorching hot streams rushed to the wounds on the bones, and at a speed that Wu Qi could sense, the bones and marrow began to heal and regenerate. Initially, Yen Hua thought that his two personal guards would be able to kill Wu Qi with ease. When he saw two sword beams piercing through the air, a cold and complacent smile emerged on his face as he struggled to his feet. Before he could regain his balance, Wu Qi had wounded himself in the most violent and barbaric way, then killed the two strongest embryonic breath realm cultivators who served Yen Hua. Yen Hua was about to throw his head back and laugh out loud complacently, but his body suddenly trembled. His laughter was suddenly stuck in his throat, and turned into a strange clucking sound that sounded like a hen that had just laid eggs. He stared at Wu Qi while shivering as he couldn't figure out why Wu Qi, who had just reached meridian cultivating tier of Xiantian realm, was able to kill the two strongest personal guards of him. Somebody. Yen Hua pointed his finger at Wu Qi, but in the end he could only let out a long and shrill cry. Outside the hall, the armored guards brought by Yen Hua had already rushed into the hall. However, as the bodies of two cultivators exploded, sending countless dark poisonous blood and flesh flying in all directions, they had no choice but to scatter in all directions. At this moment, Yen Hua let out a wild cry, and all of them pulled out their swords, charging towards Wu Qi like a tidal wave. Clang! A sword cry rang out, as a soft sword came swaying towards Yen Hua. Like a poisonous snake, it coiled 3 rounds around Yen Hua's neck. The quality of the soft sword was very good, as it was a sharp weapon meticulously crafted by an expert craftsman. The razor-sharp edge of the sword was pressed against Yen Hua's neck, and a bone-piercing cold air nearly froze his body, silencing his shrill and unpleasant cry. Lu Chengfeng held the hilt of the sword steadily, his fingers not moving at all. He stuck close to Yen Hua's back, then shouted with a cold and merciless voice, "Prince Ci, not only is Wu Qi my chief hanger-on, he is also my sworn brother. I'm sorry, but if you want to kill him, I'll kill you instead." Yen Hua cried out as if he had just seen a ghost. "Duke Yen Lu, have you gone mad? Do you know the consequences of killing me?" With a ferocious voice, Lu Chengfeng said, "So what if I kill you? At the worst, I'll just wander around the world. As long as I still have my sworn brothers and friends, where can I make a name for myself? You came to my house and forcefully demanded my Iron Mountain smelting factory. That is no different from humiliating me. You also killed my sworn brother, my chief hanger-on. You didn't give me any face, so what if I kill you?" Holding the sword with his right hand, Lu Chengfeng reached out his left hand and lightly patted on Yan Heluo's cheek. Lu Chengfeng, who had always been gentle and elegant and had the air of a young master from an influential clan, was now like a wild wolf that was forced into a desperate situation, bringing with him a ferocious and murderous aura, which was exactly the same as Wu Qi's. Yan Heluo, can you tell me, is your neck made of flesh and blood? Can this soft sword chop off your big head? Wu Qi coughed out a mouthful of blood, then gave Lu Chengfeng a thumbs up with a strange laugh and said, "Hee hee, aren't you forcing me to never leave you behind for the rest of my life? Hee hee, you are indeed a good brother." None of the armored soldiers who rushed into the hall dared to move. While laughing wildly, Wu Qi came before Yan Heluo, swung his hand and gave him a tight slap on the face. The slap nearly knocked Yan Heluo's teeth out. Yan Heluo's neck tilted to one side, and the edge of the sword tightened its grip. A large piece of the white skin on his neck was cut open, and blood immediately flowed out from the wound. Yan Heluo and Yan Bugui cried out at the same time, "Stop! We can discuss this." Chapter 75. Lu Chengfeng smiled, a very bright smile. He gave Wu Qi a look filled with deep emotions, then pushed the tip of the sword slightly into Yan Heluo's flesh. A stream of blood slowly slid down from Yan Heluo's skin, and his face, which had just recovered a little bit, turned unsightly again. He just wanted to give Lu Chengfeng a show of strength by beating his hanger-on to death, so that Lu Chengfeng would listen to him obediently. Wasn't it normal for him, Prince Ci, to beat a few men to death? Why would Wu Qi have such an intense reaction? Why would Lu Chengfeng attack him, one of the 8 princes who supervised the state affairs, just for a mere hanger-on? Prince I laughed and said, "Surrender to the barbarians? They will never trust you." Wu Qi looked at Yan Heluo with a smile on his face. Suddenly he thrust the dagger in his hand into Yan Heluo's thigh. With a smile on his face, Wu Qi nodded at Yan Heluo, then he forcefully poked a few times on Yan Heluo's body with his finger, cutting off all the meridians in his body and sealing off all the innate energy in his body. The heaven-shadowing finger of this meridian-breaking restrictive spell came from Scroll of Stealing and was a profound and magical technique. Not only could it be used on human beings, it could also be used on demon beasts, spirit beasts, or even legendary immortal beasts and divine beasts. Wu Qi sat down on the low couch opposite Yan Heluo, crossed his legs, and narrowed his eyes as he sized up Yan Heluo, whose face had turned deathly pale. Yan Bugui had temporarily taken on the role of a servant. He picked up a copper kettle placed on top of a small stove in a corner of the inner hall, brewed a pot of tea, and poured a cup of hot tea for each of the people present. Before Yan Heluo could say anything, Wu Qi sprung up and sat right next to Yan Heluo in a friendly manner. Hugging Yan Heluo's shoulder, he said smilingly, "Why don't we do this? You can use the most vicious oath of your soul to swear a blood oath. As long as you have the slightest thought or action towards our young master or anyone close to our young master, you will die without a burial place. After you die, you will be divided and eaten by millions of animals. Your soul will never be able to reincarnate, and your line of descendants will be cut off. Even the members of your clan will die a horrible death. What do you think?" Just as they left the mansion, Yan Heluo gritted his teeth and ordered, "Execute concubine Oriole, and beat her brother to death." Yan Fu, who was frightened by the tragic turn of events, but still maintained the bearing and demeanor of a butler of the Duke's mansion, walked in and led the soldiers out of the hall as if they were ducks being chased away. Now that Yan Heluo was under someone's control, no matter how unwilling these armored soldiers were, they had no choice but to follow Yan Fu out of the hall. After that, Yan Bugui nimbly leaped over and closed the door. Wu Qi smiled and said, "You don't have the intention to become enemies with our young master, but you have ordered me to be beaten to death." He casually clapped his hands, wiping away the blood staining his hands. Then, he took out an outer robe from his storage bag and put it on, covering the torn back part of his shirt and trousers. With a relaxed and joyful smile on his face, the blood gleam in Wu Qi's eyes was quickly retracted. Indifferently, he waved his hand at those armored soldiers, who had their bodies tensed up and their nerves were on the verge of breaking. Yen Helua stared at Wu Qi as if he had just seen a ghost, while Lu Chengfeng and Yen Bugui had their faces turned extremely strange. Did they really have to make such a scene? With Yen Helua's status and identity, not to mention exchanging the few iron mountains with the fishery, pearl quarry, and jade mine, even if he asked for them for free, how many people in Great Yen Dynasty would dare to not give him face? Even if it was that stingy Yu Xian, if he, Yen Helua, wanted to get a few mineral veins from him, Yu Xian would at most ask for an equivalent exchange. The inner hall was a small compartment with luxurious furnishings. Everything was exquisite and luxurious. 2 incense burners shaped like the heaven-swallowing toad were emitting a faint purple aroma. The rich fragrance of lilies filled the air, washing away the smell of blood that came from the front hall. Lu Chengfeng pressed Yen Helua down on a low couch and sat down, then he himself sat right next to Yen Helua. If you don't swear, I will assume that your highness, Prince Ci, will seek revenge from us in the future. If that is the case, no wonder you can't walk out of Duke Yen Li's mansion today. Lu Chengfeng was just a duke who had just arrived in Ji City, without any foundation or power. He was just a duke with an undeserved reputation. Yen Helua had given him a great honor by personally exchanging his properties with him. How did things turn out like this? With a complicated look in his eyes, Yen Helua gazed at Wu Qi and nearly cursed out loud. Holding the dagger, Wu Qi forcefully twisted and turned a few rounds in Yen Helua's thigh muscles, causing him to scream out in pain. Wu Qi hated the fact that his cultivation base was not strong enough. If he had the cultivation of Jin Dan realm, he would be able to seize Yen Helua's nascent divinity and swear an oath with his nascent divinity. This would be the safest way. But now, he could only be careful and take precautions, and hope that Yen Helua's oath would have a binding effect on him. 15 minutes later, Yen Helua, who had changed his clothes, left Duke Yen Li's mansion with an extremely unsightly face. Wu Qi sneered and said, "I've told them, we'll use your head to pave the way. Will they believe the head of one of the 8 princes of Great Yen Dynasty? Or we can just bring you alive and seek refuge with the barbarians. With your testimony, they should believe us, right?" Yen Helua gazed at Yen Bugui, then said with a bitter voice, "This time, it was my new concubine who begged me. Her elder brother had his eyes on the 7 iron mountains and 5 iron smelting workshops in Duke Yen Li's fief. That's why he begged me, using the few fish farms, pearl farms, and jade mines to exchange for them. But I never expected that I would suffer such a great hardship." Holding the teacup with both hands and fiddling with the lid, Wu Qi gazed at Yen Helua from the corner of his eyes, sneered and said, "Tell me, Your Highness Princey, why did you come to our young master's mansion? It seems like you're here to bully us. If we're talking about the title of nobility, you're a prince. If we're talking about the seniority, you're a senior. If we're talking about the power, you're one of the 8 princes of Great Yen Dynasty. Is it really necessary for you to make such a scene just for a few iron mountains?" Wu Qi gave Yen Bugui a look. Without saying a word, Yen Bugui spun and left the inner hall. Not long after that, he could clearly sense the ripples of wood element energies coming from the outside, along with the faint howls of wind-breaking wolves. After a while, Yen Bugui returned to the inner hall. He had already sent his subordinates to inform the scouting office about what happened here. Lu Chengfeng squeezed out a smile, slowly sheathed the flexible sword, grabbed Yen Helua and walked into the inner hall. The flexible sword that was coiled around Yen Helua's neck a moment ago had been kept back into his sleeve by Lu Chengfeng. His right hand was pressed tightly against Yen Helua's ribs, and the tip of the sword had pierced through Yen Helua's clothes, nearly piercing through his skin. As long as there was a slight change, Lu Chengfeng would just have to unleash his innate energy, and the flexible sword would pierce straight into Yen Helua's heart from the ribs. Suddenly, Wu Qi's joyful laughter rang out in the hall, which was filled with a tense atmosphere. Yen Helua couldn't help but let out a bitter smile and said, "I shouldn't have come here. Why did I have to do this? I've lost so many of my trusted soldiers, and even 2 sinecures that I've recruited with great difficulty. Really, why did I have to come here?" From the bag, Wu Qi took out a small sharp dagger, placed the teacup on the low couch, and began trimming his nails in an unhurried manner. "I, Wu Qi, am not a talented man. Although I am the chief hanger-on of our young master, we are like brothers. You're trying to kill me in front of our young master. This is not giving our young master any face. Since you're not giving our young master any face, why should I give you any? Yen Halua let out a bitter laugh, sighed and said, Why did you have to do this? I don't have the intention to become enemies with Duke Yenlu. Left with no other choice, Yen Halua could only repeat what Wu Qi said, word by word, swearing the extremely vicious oath. There were cultivators in this world, and the theory of ghosts and deities was prevalent. After swearing such a vicious oath, Yen Halua wouldn't dare to attack Wu Qi and Lu Chengfeng again. Standing at the entrance of Duke Yen Li's mansion, Wu Qi was sneering as he listened to Yen Halua's order. In an indifferent tone, Wu Qi asked, What is the background of the new concubine of Prince Ci? The elder brother of the new concubine of Yen Halua had his eyes set on the properties in Lu Chengfeng's fief. A large stream of blood was oozing out from his neck, and the clothes on his upper body were stained with blood. Trembling, Yen Halua picked up the teacup, and regardless of how hot the tea was, he tilted his head back and drank the entire cup in one gulp. He breathed out a long sigh of relief. The scalding hot tea seemed to have brought a little bit of heat to him, and the flush on his face gradually returned to his cheeks. Wu Qi clapped his hands, gave Yen Bugui a smile, and slowly walked into the hall. Yen Bugui breathed out a long sigh, frowned and looked at the mess of blood and flesh on the floor, then shook his head helplessly. He stomped his feet, rolled his eyes a few times, and hastily followed Yen Bugui into the inner hall. Yen Halua was flustered and exasperated. If not because the edge of the sword was pressing against his ribs, he would have leaped up and cursed out loud. Prince Ci's expression changed instantly. He opened his mouth but couldn't say a word. He finally knew that Wu Qi was a fugitive, a real fugitive. It was not strange for him to do anything. If Wu Qi really brought Yen Halua's head to the barbarians, those barbarians would definitely welcome them with great joy. Even if they did not go to the barbarians, Great Yen Dynasty had a vast territory, and there were so many vassal kingdoms. After Wu Qi and his men killed Yen Halua, as long as they escaped from Ji City, they would be able to find shelter anywhere. Wu Qi sighed, shook his head and said, If we killed Prince Ci, one of the 8 princes, we just need to bring his head and escape to the territory controlled by those barbarians. I think we will be able to live a good life there. The women of the barbarians are very beautiful, and the way they eat and drink is not any worse than the women of Great Yen Dynasty. When we are bored, we can just bring a few barbarians out of the forest and kill some people, seize some territories, and live a carefree life. Wu Qi looked at Yen Halua, who was covered with blood stains. He pondered for a long while, then breathed out a long sigh and said, You are, after all, a prince of Great Yen Dynasty. We don't dare to kill you. But we don't dare to let you go just like that. It is too troublesome for one of the 8 princes to find trouble with our young master. What are you doing? What are you doing? Our young master is a relative of Prince Ci, and Prince Ci is also our young master's elder. What is the purpose of you, a group of outsiders, being an eyesore when an elder is chatting with a junior? Yen Fu, give each of them a gold ingot, and send them out to enjoy good wine and meat. Yen Bugui snorted coldly, cupped his fist and bowed to Yen Halua, then said with a deep voice, Who is Prince Ci here to negotiate with Duke Yenlu? Yen Halua was struck dumb. His face twitched, then he said with a cold voice, She is the daughter of Prince Fuling of Xian Kingdom. Xian Kingdom? Didn't the hostage of Xian Kingdom die tragically 2 nights ago because of Duke Yenlu? So, I'm being used as a weapon by someone? How dare they? Wu Qi and Yen Bugui exchanged a glance. Both of them twitched their lips at the same time, revealing a cold, thoughtful smile. Chapter 76. After Prince Ci, Yen Halua, was sent away, the following half a month of peace and tranquility, and nothing else happened. Under the guidance of Yen Fu and Yen Bugui, Lu Chengfeng began to visit the important figures in Ji City in an orderly manner. The clan leaders of various imperial clans, the heads of a few influential clans, the prime ministers and 9 ministers, and many high ministers and ministers. During the half a month of time, Lu Chengfeng barely managed to straighten out all these relationships and became familiar with all the influential figures in Ji City. However, Lu Chengfeng still had a long way to go before he could truly enter the core circle of nobles of Great Yan Dynasty, possess the relationship and power network that a duke should have, and truly grasp the power and authority of Zhuguixing. It would take a long time for him to succeed. Fortunately, the influential members of the 9th clan of Great Yan Dynasty, whose clan master was Duke Yan Li's bloodline, had taken the initiative to join them. Led by Yan Jiuhui, the members of the 9th clan of Great Yan Dynasty, there were military officers, ministers of the imperial court, and some high-ranking members of scouting office. With their bloodline as the bond, several dozens of influential figures had taken the initiative to gather around Lu Chengfeng. Finally, he had a force that he could use. For the past half a month, Wu Qi had been so busy that he kept slapping his buttocks with his heels. Together with Yan Jiuhui and the other capable men, he focused on checking the accounts of Duke Yan Lu, as well as the money and goods stored in the treasury. With that, he had roughly sorted out the general affairs of the 9th clan. Through this check, Wu Qi and Lu Chengfeng learned that the two fiefs of Duke Yan Lu were not only the hereditary fiefs of Lu Chengfeng, but also the public assets of many branch clans of the 9th clan. 60% of the annual output of the fiefs would be distributed by Lu Chengfeng to the influential members of the 9th clan. Some members of the imperial clan who had no official position in the imperial court were living off this money. Meanwhile, the 40% of the income left behind by Lu Chengfeng would not be solely enjoyed by him. If one of the members of the 9th sect encountered a calamity, or had a headache or fever, and needed a lot of money to help, Lu Chengfeng, as the new sect lord, would have to pull some money out of his own pocket to help the members of the 9th sect solve their problems. Since the establishment of Great Yan Dynasty over 2,000 years ago, Lu Chengfeng was the only direct descendant of the 9th clan, while there were over 8,000 members of the Yan clan who were born by concubines. The total number of personal guards, servants, and serving ladies of these clan members was over 400,000. Among these 8,000 members of the Yan clan, there were only a few hundred elite members like Yan Jiuhui and Bugui, and Yan Bugui and Yan clan members. After spending half a month to Yan clan, Jiuhui, Yan and Bugui, Yan Wu and Yan Zhuangde and Yan and Bun, Yan and Yan and is. Initially, both of them thought they had picked up a great bargain, but now, they realized that they had actually found themselves in great trouble. Holding a cup of tea in his hand, Lu Chengfeng sat on the stairs in the main hall of the Duke mansion with his legs crossed. While sipping the tea, he said with a sigh, "I thought after inheriting the throne, I would be able to enjoy a life of luxury and happiness. Little did I know, there are so many troubles waiting for me." Wu Qi sat next to him, also crossing his legs and sighing. "That's right. The hostage of Xian Kingdom, the son of the monarch of a kingdom, was killed by us. Prince Ci, Yan Helua, was covered in blood by us. The chief supervisor of Central Wind Guard, Qin Qingshui, seems to be hostile to us. There are over 8,000 members of the 9th clan, and we have to handle countless affairs, including life, death, sickness, and old age. Why bother?" Shaking his head, Lu Chengfeng said with a deep voice, "Never mind, since we are already here, let's just take things as they come. We still need to send some capable men to keep an eye on Little Meng City, as the annual production there is not a small amount. I've already communicated with my mother, and from now on, the Three Mountains province, where Little Meng City is located, will be my private territory." Wu Qi frowned and said with a soft voice, "Put it aside for now. Little Meng City won't be in any trouble for the time being. When young master has more men, we'll send some of our trusted men there. We need to mobilize the soldiers from there as soon as possible, or else, young master won't have enough guards. Young master's father was assassinated, and we still haven't found out the exact reason. Young master's safety can't be neglected." While chatting with each other, they gradually sorted out the recent events and made a rough plan for their future development. Everything seemed to be going smoothly for now. As long as those friends of Lu Chengfeng who came from the influential clans of Lu Kingdom came to Ji City, he would have a batch of men he could use as his subordinates, and the current troubles would be solved. As he had no men he could use, Lu Chengfeng had to write the visiting cards himself when he went out to visit those nobles from the imperial court. This was just too unreasonable. While they were having a heated conversation, Yan Fu, with his head lowered, dashed into the room with a clear palm print on his face. He bowed respectfully to Lu Chengfeng, then said with a bitter voice, "Master, someone is visiting from outside the mansion. He looks menacing and it doesn't look easy to deal with him. Please be careful, master." Casually throwing the teacup to Lao He, who was standing right next to him, Lu Chengfeng rose to his feet angrily and shouted, "Who is this rude guy? Since he has come to visit, why did he slap you?" Yan Fu was a servant of Duke Yan Li's mansion, and he had been serving as the chief steward of Duke Yan Li's mansion for nearly 100 years. When Lu Chengfeng first came to Ji City, he was still a little worried about Yan Fu and the other old stewards. However, after a period of observation, especially after Yan Jiuhui used the power of scouting office to cooperate with the investigation, he found out that the loyalty of Yan Fu and the other stewards of Duke Yan Li's mansion was absolutely impeccable. For these loyal and reliable old men in the mansion, Lu Chengfeng had been relying more and more on them. But now Yan Fu was slapped by someone. This was not a slap to Yan Fu, but a slap to Lu Chengfeng's face. Yan Fu let out a bitter laugh, lowered his voice and said, "Master, you have to be careful. The visitor is very arrogant, as if she is here to cause trouble. The people following her are all imperial guards of the scouting office." Apart from the East, South, West and Central Wind Guards, there was another independent department in scouting office, the Palace Guards. All the people in this Palace Guards were elites selected from 10,000, and they were responsible for protecting the important members of the imperial clan. Normally, the Palace Guards would only appear around the members of the lineal clan of Great Yan Dynasty. The so-called lineal clan of Great Yan Dynasty was the lineal clan of Emperor Yan Dan's eldest son, the Crown Prince of Great Yan Dynasty. The Palace Guards were responsible for protecting the Crown Prince of Yan Dan, the Crown Prince's son, the Crown Prince's eldest son, as well as the lineal clan of the Crown Prince. According to the rule of Great Yan Dynasty, the Palace Guards were responsible for protecting the lineal clan of the future Crown Prince of Great Yan Dynasty. Upon learning that the man who slapped Yan Fu was followed by the Palace Guards, Lu Chengfeng's face turned a little unsightly. Yet, Wu Qi sneered and said, "Someone from the lineal clan? So what? Yan Fu, did he tell you his name and background?" Yan Fu bowed his head and said carefully, "Mr. Wu Qi, that man is a very fierce man. He slapped me and a few of my children the moment he saw me. He said he wanted Master to welcome him personally, but he didn't tell us his name and background. However, no one has the guts to impersonate the Palace Guards serving her." Wu Qi and Lu Chengfeng exchanged a glance. Lu Chengfeng snorted coldly and asked Xiao He to gather a group of guards. Together with Yan Bugui, who had rushed here after hearing the news, they quickly walked towards the entrance of the Duke Mansion. They went around a few pavilions and walked past the big courtyard behind the mansion. When they came to the screen wall behind the main entrance, they heard a soft and tender voice of a lady coming from outside the door. "Your Duke Yan Lu is too arrogant. It has been so long and he still hasn't come out to welcome the guest. Are you looking down on me?" A crystal clear sound of slapping was heard, as if someone was slapped again. Lu Chengfeng's expression changed again. He quickened his pace and dashed out of the mansion with just a few steps. Outside the entrance of Duke Yan Li's mansion, nearly 100 palace guards, clad in dark green soft armors, were escorting a luxurious four-wheeled coach. 12 gatekeepers of Duke Yan Li's mansion were kneeling down at the bottom of the stairs in front of the entrance, and were being slapped by 2 teenage girls who looked like serving ladies. The dozens of guards standing before the entrance of the Duke mansion wanted to step forward and stop them, but they were stopped by those palace guards. Both sides were at daggers drawn, and a fight could break out at any time. "Stand back!" Lu Chengfeng shouted out lightly. The dozens of palace guards quickly took a few steps back. However, those palace guards were insatiable. With a faint smile on their faces, they strode forward and chased after these palace guards, all the way up the stairs in front of the Duke mansion. Wu Qi snorted coldly and stamped his feet forcefully. Meng Xiaobai, who was following closely behind Lu Chengfeng, let out the loud shout. Together with a few guards from Meng village, they lifted up their iron spears and dashed forward. The iron spear, which had the diameter of a small bowl, was thrust forward, bringing up a swooshing sound of wind and forcing the dozens of palace guards who had just stepped onto the stairs back down. Two serving ladies, who had their eyes narrowed into a thin line and were slapping the gatekeepers, cried out in shock. They hastily ran to the side of the coach, looked at the direction of the coach and murmured something under their breath. "Yo, it's so difficult to meet Duke Yenlu." The soft and delicate voice of a lady came out from the coach. Wu Qi knitted his brows. The voice of the lady sounded very familiar. It sounded exactly the same as the voice of the lady who released the demon ghost and clashed with Wu Qi on the night when Lu Chengfeng was attacked half a month ago. Lu Chengfeng snorted and strode down the stairs. He pulled up those gatekeepers whose faces were badly beaten and shouted coldly, "Yen Fu, give each of them 10 ingots of silver as a reward, and let them have a good rest for 1 month." Yen Fu answered. He glared fiercely at the coach, then hastily ordered those gatekeepers to retreat into the mansion. The gatekeepers of Duke Yen Li's mansion were the sons of servants in the mansion, and they had been serving as servants for generations. Yen Fu had always treated these people as his own children. Today, they were slapped by someone for no apparent reason, and it made him feel both heartache and anger. 10 ingots of silver? Duke Yen Li's mansion is indeed rich. The lady in the coach sneered and said, "If that's the case, I won't be courteous with you. Duke Yen Li can reward a few lowly gatekeepers with 10 ingots of silver. Many of my personal guards have been killed by your hanger-on, and my personal demon ghost guards have been severely wounded as well. Duke Yen Li, you have to compensate me with 5 million gold coins." 5 million gold coins? Lu Chengfeng and Wu Qi were taken aback. The total annual expenditure of hundreds of thousands of city guards in Ji City, including armaments, armors, and other military supplies, was less than 1 million gold coins. Asking for 5 million gold coins as compensation? That was not the way to demand an exorbitant price. Wu Qi sneered and said, "Who are you? Please come out and talk to me." The lady sneered and said, "I? Do you think I'm afraid of you? Come out and talk to me, then come out and talk to me. I'm here to denounce you. If you don't give me an explanation today, I'll make sure you won't be able to move a single step in Ji City." Suddenly, the door on one side of the coach opened up, and a slim figure walked out slowly. Chapter 77. Autumn water as divine jade as bones, just like a fairy walking on ripples entering the mortal world. The lady who walked out from the coach was the most beautiful lady Wu Qi had ever seen since he arrived in this world. Even the barbarian girl who had merged with the innate water serpent in the depths of Meng Mountains was not as beautiful as this young lady. She was so beautiful that it could shake one's soul. If there was a source of calamity in this world, then it should be this young lady. Wu Qi was not surprised that he used the word tragic to describe her. If not for the fact that she was born in a prestigious family and was protected by the palace guards, Wu Qi had no doubt that with her beauty that could topple a state, she and the people around her would only end up with a miserable fate that could only be described as tragic. The young lady was not tall. She was about 1.75 meters tall, which could only be considered as an average height in this world. However, her posture was perfect to the point of being impeccable. She was graceful, and every move she made seemed to affect the surrounding environment. There was a gentle glow emitting from her body. When she walked out from the coach, the surrounding air was lit up. A gentle breeze blew past, and a refreshing fragrance came wafting into Wu Qi's face. Wu Qi could smell it clearly. It was not the fragrance of incense, nor was it the fragrance found in other sachets, but the natural fragrance of this young lady. Even though he was 20 to 30 feet away from Wu Qi, he could still smell the natural fragrance that felt like the condensation of the essence of 100 flowers. Wu Qi's heart skipped a beat, and all he could do was to scream in his mind. This was a girl who was truly a monster. The young lady had a head of long black hair, which was coiled into 3 buns, decorated with a few exquisite flower ornaments. Amidst her luxurious appearance, there was a hint of playfulness that could only be found in young girls. She had a pretty face that was exquisite and impeccable, and her rosy lips were twitching disdainfully. Amidst her nobility, there was a hint of naughtiness, a hint of unruliness, and a hint of barbarism. A luxurious palace dress of dark green had wrapped around the slender and beautiful body of the young lady, making her curvaceous body look even more enchanting. The style of palace dress in Great Yen Dynasty was conservative and traditional. Normally, even the neck of a lady would be tightly wrapped. And this young lady's palace dress was obviously specially made. Not only was her slender and fair neck completely exposed, even her chest was in the style of a Tang Dynasty noble lady's dress, revealing a large area of white, tender, and flawless flesh. She was of noble birth, pampered, mischievous, unruly, and rebellious. Wu Qi saw through this girl's nature with a single glance. Yen Bugui and all the other scouting officers knelt down in front of the young lady. "Your subjects greet Princess Zhang Lu." Yen Bugui, who was kneeling on the ground, raised his head slightly, his hands grabbing onto Lu Chengfeng and Wu Qi's clothes, pulling hard, signaling them to kneel down and pay their respects. Princess Zhang Lu, the youngest daughter of Emperor Yen Dan's eldest son, Yen Qijuan. 18 years ago, Yen Qijuan, who was in a secluded cultivation, made a breakthrough, and his Jin Dan attained the mastery stage, stepping into the realm of peak stage human immortal. Overjoyed, Yen Qijuan held a banquet to celebrate, and when he was drunk, he forced himself on a barbarian beauty who was presented to him by a vassal kingdom. As a human immortal of mastery realm, Jin Dan had a stable meridian, and its energy would not leak easily. But that night, Yen Qijuan was too excited, and he was drunk. As a result, he accidentally gave birth to the barbarian beauty, and she became pregnant. After 3 years of pregnancy, the barbarian beauty gave birth to a baby, who was the current Princess Zhang Lu. Meanwhile, the barbarian beauty had consumed too much of her energy during the 3 years of pregnancy, and after giving birth to Zhang Lu, her blood essence dried up and she died. A barbarian beauty who was presented to the crown prince of Great Yen Dynasty by a vassal kingdom was a peerless beauty that could only be seen once in a million people. Princess Zhang Lu had inherited her mother's peerless beauty, and she was even more beautiful than her mother. Ever since she was young, she was given the title of the #1 beauty in Great Yen Dynasty. On top of that, Yen Qijuan lost his energy in Jin Dan's mastery realm, and that was the reason why he had Princess Zhang Lu. Jin Dan was a human immortal of mastery realm, and even a tiny bit of energy was no trivial matter. Princess Zhang Lu was born with this tiny bit of energy essence, and when she was born, her meridians were all cleared, and she had the cultivation base of respiration tier of Xiantian realm. She was a rare genius in cultivation, and her bone structure was unparalleled. With such beauty, such innate talent, and the fact that she was the direct granddaughter of Emperor Yen Dan, when Princess Zhang Lu was born, she was granted 100 cities as her fief by Yen Dan himself. After that, every year on her birthday, she would be granted more fief. Half a year ago, when Princess Zhang Lu was on her 15th birthday, she had accumulated 3 fief provinces, and they were the 3 richest and most densely populated provinces in Great Yen Dynasty. Not to mention the others, the elite army of these 3 provinces alone had a total of 150 battalions, and a total of 75,000 soldiers. On top of that, these 3 provinces were located right next to Ji City, and the elite army of these 3 provinces were all cavalries. With just an order from Princess Zhang Lu, 75,000 elite cavalries could arrive at Ji City at any time. 3 years ago, there was once an ignorant son of an aristocratic family from a vassal kingdom who blocked the way of Princess Zhang Lu on the street. As a result, Princess Zhang Lu deployed 30,000 soldiers and marched into Ji City, massacring all the properties of that aristocratic family in Ji City. More than 3,000 people were killed on the street. After that, the punishment that Princess Zhang Lu received was nothing more than being grounded for 3 days, and Yen Dan personally fined her half a month's worth of taxes from her fief. After that, Princess Zhang Lu had become the devil incarnate that no one dared to offend in Ji City. Even the 8 princes who were responsible for managing the state affairs of Great Yan Dynasty didn't dare to offend her. Even the title of Princess Zhongli was given to her by Yen Dan after she took a fancy to Zhongli Palace, the place where Yen Dan used to have his secluded cultivation. After that, she forcefully snatched Zhongli Palace, which occupied an area of a few hundred miles, from Yen Dan's hands. Great Yan Dynasty had been founded for over 2,000 years, and Yen Dan had been living in seclusion in Zhongli Palace for over 1,700 years. Every single grass and every single tree in that place was personally planted and taken care of by Yen Dan. However, it only took Princess Zhongli 3 days to make Yen Dan own Zhongli. From this, one could tell how important she was in Yen Dan's heart and how much he loved her. Who dared to offend such a person? Who dared to offend her? Using the simplest words, Yen Bugui told Lu Chengfeng and Wu Qi, fearing that they would be disrespectful to Princess Zhongli and bring trouble to themselves. After learning about Princess Zhongli's background and her towering arrogance in Ji City, Lu Chengfeng felt his head spinning and couldn't react for a long time. How did he offend such a disaster that he couldn't afford to offend? Princess Zhongli was the most beloved granddaughter of Yen Dan, and she was his direct descendant. On the other hand, Lu Chengfeng was just a descendant of the 9th clan of Yen clan, which was founded by the 9th son of Yen Dan's concubine. Although he had shed a drop of his blood and returned to the clan, his background was, after all, an illegitimate son. No matter it was in terms of intimacy or seniority, there was a huge gap between him and Princess Zhongli, and there was no way they could be compared. Following the pulling force of Yen Bugui, Lu Chengfeng knelt down on the ground, bowed feebly and said, "Duke Yen Lu Zhuguijing of Great Yan Dynasty offers greetings to Princess." Princess Zhongli held her head high, snorted coldly and said, "Yen Buji can be considered as a good man. He wandered around the world and brought me many interesting and novel things from different kingdoms. Therefore, I still remember his kindness. But you're not a good man. On the first day you came to the city, you killed my good friend, Taba Qingye, right in front of me, and killed so many of my personal guards. I'll make you pay for this." With her head held high, supported by 2 serving ladies, she slowly walked up the stairs of Duke Yen Li's mansion. With a cold voice, Princess Zhongli said, "If I didn't show up, you could barely appease my anger with 5 million gold coins. But, since you've asked me to come out from the coach, do you think you can send away those lowly beggars with just 5 million gold coins?" Escorted by a large group of imperial guards, Princess Zhongli came straight to the main hall of Duke Yen Li's mansion, where the guests were received. Without being greeted by anyone, she sat down on the main seat in the middle. She gave Lu Chengfeng a glance, whose face had turned pale, then Princess Zhongli said with a gentle voice, "I'm not an unreasonable person. You've killed Taba Qingye and many of my personal guards. Pay me 50 million gold coins, and I'll let this matter go." 50 million gold coins? Lu Chengfeng's face suddenly turned pale, while Yen Fu's face darkened, his eyes rolled up and he fainted on the ground. 50 million gold coins. This was the total annual tax revenue of the few strongest vassal kingdoms of Great Yan Dynasty. If Lu Chengfeng were to pay 50 million gold coins now, he would have to immediately sell off all the properties in his fief of 2 provinces, such as iron mountains, gold mines, copper mines, and all the other mines. He would also have to sell off all the shops and their employees. He would also have to sell off all the farmlands, forests, pastures, mansions, and everything else. Perhaps he would be able to gather such a huge sum of money. Yen Bugui was struck dumb. He stared blankly at Princess Zhongli, then asked an extremely stupid question. "Your Highness, do you know how much 50 million gold coins are worth?" Indifferently, Princess Zhongli gazed at Yen Bugui, smiled and said, "Indeed, I don't know how much 50 million gold coins are worth. But I'm sure it's worth 30 slaps. Slap yourself 30 times, and I'll forgive your offense." Yen Bugui swallowed a mouthful of saliva, raised his trembling hand, and was about to slap himself. A cold gleam flashed across Wu Qi's eyes. He recalled Yen Bugui's resolute and decisive killing in the woods of Meng Mountains, and recalled how he dashed into the midst of millions of barbarians, bathed in blood and slaughtering them. How could such a brave man slap himself just because of a sentence from a 15-year-old girl? An evil flame rushed up from his heart to his head. Suddenly, Wu Qi let out a laugh. Princess Zhongli gazed at Wu Qi coldly, nodded her head and said, "You're the one who killed my personal guards and wounded my demon ghost. Your name is Wu Qi, isn't it? Just now at the entrance of the mansion, you didn't kneel down and greet me. Now, kneel down and give me 300 kowtows, and I won't ask my men to slap you." Wu Qi narrowed his eyes and smiled brilliantly. His smile was filled with a dangerous aura. Almost instinctively, a dozen of palace guards stepped forward and stood between Wu Qi and Princess Zhongli. Princess Zhongli looked at Wu Qi curiously and asked, "What are you laughing at? Don't tell me you want to kill me?" Wu Qi took a deep breath. Suddenly, his tone became extremely gentle and sweet, filled with a flirtatious, pinkish charm. This tone was the same one that came out from Liu Xiaobai's mouth when she was chased by dozens of beautiful girls in the red light district of Holland. "Your Highness, who is as beautiful as the stars in the sky, can you please listen to the heartfelt words of a lowly human being?" Obviously, Princess Zhongli was startled. She blinked her eyes quickly and asked blankly, "What did you just say?" Wu Qi smiled gently, like a spring breeze brushing through a field of dogtail flowers. He was extremely gentle, and filled with tenderness and sweetness as he said, "Actually, what I want to say is, your beauty should not exist in this world. But you are here. This is the gift from the heaven to all the humans in this world. Every frown and smile of yours, every move you make, even your soft voice, they are all so charming." The gentle words of love were like a trickle of water, slowly dripping into the tender heart of Princess Zhongli. The heaven had taken pity on Princess Zhongli. Now that she was 15 years old, who in Great Yan Dynasty dared to talk to her like this? Wu Qi repeated all the 11,000 classic lines of love he learned from Liu Xiaobai's soul fragment, and Princess Zhongli was addicted to them. She had fallen. Therefore, in just a short period of time, he had conquered Princess Zhongli, who was only 15 years old and in the prime of her youth. "Wu Qi, you have to tell me the truth. Is Zhongli really beautiful?" Princess Zhongli's face was blushing. She was already half drunk. "Not just beautiful, but absolutely beautiful. I swear to the heavens, in all these years, I have never seen a woman more beautiful than you. Compared to you, all the women in the world are not even worth a strand of your hair." Boldly, Wu Qi reached out his hand and lifted a strand of Princess Zhongli's long hair. Slowly, he let the strand of hair slide down from his fingertip, glinting with a dark green hue under the moonlight. Princess Zhongli took a deep breath. Her blushing face became even more bashful. "Is what you said true? But no one has ever told Zhongli that she is so beautiful." Princess Zhongli moved closer to Wu Qi, and nearly half of her body was pressed into Wu Qi's chest. Lu Qingfeng and Yan Bugui, who were standing at the side, were throwing sidelong glances at them. They kept pouring cup after cup of fine wine into their mouths while grimacing in pain. Wu Qi smiled faintly, revealing his 8 snow-white teeth. Gently, he stroked Princess Zhongli's hair, then with a deep and charming voice, he said, "All the women in the world will not praise your beauty in front of you, because they are jealous of you. Except for me, no man in the world dares to describe your perfection in front of you, because they are ashamed of their own inferiority." Princess Zhongli picked up her wine cup, smilingly clinked it with Wu Qi's and said, "But why did you tell Zhongli the truth?" Wu Qi pointed his finger at the surface of the lake. 20 feet away, a light pink lotus flower drifting on the surface of the lake floated up and landed on Wu Qi's palm. He brought the lotus flower to Princess Zhongli and said with a low voice, "The gentleness of bowing her head is exactly like the shyness of the lotus flower. Princess, you are 10,000 times more beautiful than this flower." Princess Zhongli stared at Wu Qi, her body and mind intoxicated. She snorted and said in a low voice, "You haven't told me, why did you tell Zhongli the truth?" Placing the lotus flower on Princess Zhongli's palm, Wu Qi sighed and said, "The dark night has given me a pair of black eyes, and I am using them to find the most beautiful light in the dark night. The reason why Wu Qi told Princess the truth is that I was born for the beauty of Princess. Lu Chengfeng suddenly shivered. Shivering, he turned his head and stared blankly at the patch of heavenly purple radish blooming at the edge of the lake. Princess Zhongli brought the lotus flower closer to her face and took a deep breath. Her beautiful eyes turned watery, and her rosy lips curved into a beautiful smile. Boldly, she reached out her hand and touched Wu Qi's cheek, then said with a gentle voice, "Are you born for my beauty? Are you born for Zhongli? What you said, no one has ever told Zhongli before." "You're a good man, you're a very good man," murmured Princess Zhongli. "Taba Qingye is not a good man." Boldly, Wu Qi held Princess Zhongli's hand and said with a gentle voice, "Princess, please understand. Taba Qingye wants to kill Wu Qi, but he asked Princess to just stand aside and watch the show. Obviously, he is using Princess as a shield. If not because Wu Qi has some abilities, perhaps he would have succeeded long ago, and Princess wouldn't be able to see Wu Qi today." Sighing lightly, Wu Qi stared deeply into Princess Zhongli's blurry eyes, sighed and said, "The rarest thing in life is to find a bosom friend. But, Princess is Wu Qi's bosom friend. For so many years, this is the first time Wu Qi told a girl the words in his heart." Princess Zhongli smiled, a very charming smile. Gently, she stroked Wu Qi's cheek and said with a gentle voice, "Bosom friend?" Zhongli finally understood. Taba Qingye is really up to no good. He knows that Zhongli is bored in the palace, so he purposely sent someone to tell Zhongli that there will be a good show tonight, and asked Zhongli to wait at the place where he ambushed you. He is trying to use Zhongli's influence to atone for his crime. Wu Qi nodded his head heavily and said with a deep voice, "Princess is a wise and far-sighted person. How could those despicable people hide their thoughts from Princess?" Princess Zhongli's face turned slightly unsightly. She said coldly, "I had forgotten about this, but when Tuoba Haofeng returned to Ji City today, he purposely mentioned this to me. Is he trying to trick me into giving Wu Qi a hard time?" Wu Qi nodded his head and said, "That must be it. You're right. Princess, both Taba Qingye and that Tuoba Haofeng are using Princess." Wu Qi breathed out a faint sigh, then looked at Princess Zhongli affectionately and said, "Princess, you are the pearl of immortal dew, a figure like a heaven immortal. The mortal world should never taint your pure soul. However, there are countless mortals in the world, and they are always trying to use Princess. In the future, Princess, you must be cautious in your actions, and never fall into the evil intentions of those people." Princess Zhongli's face darkened. She clenched her teeth tightly and said in a cold voice, "You're right. In the future, if someone wants to talk to me, I'll come and ask you." Do you really think that just because I was born in the palace, I don't know anything? Wu Qi, you're a good man, an honest man. I understand that." Wu Qi smiled. He beckoned Lu Chengfeng and Yen Bugui to come up and propose a toast to Princess Zhongli. Then he shared a few cups of wine with Princess Zhongli, whose face was filled with a smile. After that, Wu Qi purposely picked out some things that a pampered princess who was born in the palace would never know, and told them to Princess Zhongli as if they were some strange stories from the countryside. From the marketplace of Little Meng City, to the life of a barbarian hunter, to the life of a wandering swordsman, to the life of Yen Bugui leading 80 of his subordinates in the deep mountains and forests, Wu Qi had a very good eloquence. He described all these things in a vivid manner, as if he had seen them with his own eyes. Since when had Princess Zhongli ever heard any of these? Using some techniques from the romance of Sui and Tang dynasties, Wu Qi added some details to the life of those barbarian hunters and wandering swordsmen, which made Princess Zhongli even more fascinated. She thought that those wandering swordsmen and barbarian hunters who lived on the edge of a blade were all heroes with an indomitable spirit. When Wu Qi told her about how Yen Bugui brought his subordinates and went through all kinds of hardships in the depth of Meng Mountains, going through life-and-death battles, and finally bringing back 3 precious black stone tablets for Great Yen Dynasty, he had added some extra artistic touches to the story, describing Yen Bugui as a tall, strong, and nearly perfect man of Great Yen Dynasty. And those dangers that Yen Bugue encountered in Meng Mountains were described by Wu Qi in a magnificent manner, just like a Hollywood blockbuster. Princess Zhonglu was fascinated by the story. She couldn't help but nod her head at Yen Bugue and said, "You're Yen Bugue? You're a good man. Next time, I'll talk to my father, and he'll confer you the title of general." Yen Bugue was struck dumb and couldn't react for quite a long while. Wu Qi was blushing after coming up with all these nonsense. How could he fool Princess Zhonglu to promise him the title of general? Yen Qijuan loved Princess Zhonglu the most. But if she were to speak to him, perhaps it would really come true. The moon was hanging high in the sky, and it was late at night. Zhonglu, who was almost drunk, had to return to the imperial palace. In front of all the serving ladies and guards, Princess Zhonglu held Wu Qi's hand and walked out of Duke Yen Li's mansion. She was laughing and giggling along the way, feeling extremely joyful. At the entrance of Duke Yen Li's mansion, Princess Zhonglu held Wu Qi's hand, smiled and promised him, "Wu Qi, you're my best friend now. Sometimes, I have to focus on my cultivation, so I can't visit you often. When you're free, come to Garden of Zhonglu or the Imperial Palace to visit me." Reaching out her hand, she untied an oval-shaped green jade from around her neck. Princess Zhonglu tied the jade around Wu Qi's neck. The palace guards nearby were dumbfounded when they saw this intimate behavior. Lu Qingfeng and Yen Bugue were dumbfounded. Princess Zhongli's jade pendant was given to Wu Qi just like that. This was Princess Zhongli's personal item. Wu Qi took out the 3,800 years old innate water serpent core from his storage bag and gave it to Princess Zhonglu. Wu Qi doesn't have anything valuable with him, but this inner core of a spirit beast is what Wu Qi uses for his daily cultivation. "Today, I'll give it to you, Princess." Princess Zhonglu stared blankly at the innate water serpent core in Wu Qi's hand. Suddenly, she let out a sweet smile and held it in her hand. Princess Zhonglu cast a sideways glance at Wu Qi, chuckled and said, "Count yourself lucky. Zixian is very happy with this inner core." Her red lips came close to Wu Qi's ear. Princess Zhonglu said softly, "Remember, Zhongli's name is Zixian." Slowly they boarded the coach. Surrounded by numerous guards, Princess Zhonglu and Yen Zixian left. Wu Qi took a deep breath, clasped his hands behind his back and stared at the bright moon in the sky. Suddenly, he breathed out a sigh and said, "Young master, I suddenly have a very guilty feeling." Lu Qingfeng and Yen Bugue exchanged a glance, then nodded their heads at the same time. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.